This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Portland City Council, Wednesday, June 7th, 2017. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Here.
Saltzman.
Here.
Udaly. Fritz.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here. And Commissioner Udaly is excused today. The purpose of council meetings is to do the city's business, including hearing from the community on issues of concern. In order for us to hear from everyone and to give due consideration to matters before the council, we must all endeavor to preserve the order and decorum of these meetings. To make sure the process is clear for everyone, I want to review some basic guidelines. There's two opportunities for public participation. The first is communications. Those are opportunities for people to talk about whatever they want. Those need to be scheduled in advance with Carla, the clerk, or the clerk's office. Second, people can sign up for public testimony on the first readings of reports, resolutions, and ordinances. If you sign up, your testimony must address the matter being considered at the time. Please state your name. We don't need your address. If you're a lobbyist, we need to know that. If you're here representing an organization, that's good to know too. Typically, people get 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. I want to forewarn people we have a very big agenda today, so we will likely reduce the public testimony time as we get further into the meeting. When you have 30 seconds left, you'll see a yellow light flash. When your time's up, you'll see a red light. It'll beep. Conduct that disrupts the meeting, for example, shouting or interrupting other people's testimony or interrupting during council deliberation. Excuse me, perfect example. This is a disruption that is out of order. Please don't do it again or you will be asked to leave. If there is a disruption, you'll be subject to ejection for the remainder of the meeting. Anyone who fails to leave the meeting after being ejected will be subject to arrest for trespass. If you'd like to show your support, simple thumbs up is good. If you don't, thumbs down is fine too. Personal attacks or insults levied against city and city council staff, many of whom are required to testify as a condition of their employment, is not tolerated. I'd also like to just state that we received a unanimous proclamation from the Seattle City Council honoring those who were impacted by a week ago Friday's events, Talishan and Ricky and Micah, and it also acknowledges the impact on the two young women who were subjected to bigotry and hate speech, and offers well wishes for them and their families and their communities as well. And it is a statement in support of the entire city of Portland on behalf of the Seattle City Council. I will have that on display in my office if anybody would care to see that kind proclamation. And I want the Seattle City Council to know we are very, very grateful for their thoughts at this difficult time. Communications. Please call the first item.
Item 610, request of Catherine Smith to address council regarding police issues.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, this should go 3 minutes, maybe like 10 seconds over, or maybe not. My name is Catherine Smith. Mayor Ted Wheeler and commissioners, I'm trying to have a Portland police officer make some tigered cops stop shooting me and my son with mainly microwave weapons, ultrasound weapons, voice-to-skull weapons, etc. Some Portland police and Portland police employees illegally take my letters and reports, even certified, I sent to PC Marshman, and don't give him the emails except 2 I sent to him. That's why I had to ask you, Mayor Wheeler, to tell him and to have him make a Portland police officer stop these daily crimes and attempted murder to us. The letters, reports I send you, even certified, also don't arrive to you. Same modus operandi as Portland police. It sure looks like some of your employees are in collusion with some Portland police. It appears that at least one of your older Portland city attorneys is taking those letters and has directed your email screener to not give you the emails I sent you. It is obstruction of criminal investigation, suppression of evidence, facilitation of attempted murder to me and my son that they are doing. It seems that you have been told by someone to not answer my question. What is your legal reason for not talking to PC Marshman about this so he'll transfer my case to another cop? I don't think you have a legal reason. It is a secret reason. The advisors don't want you to find out they have lied to you. I'm not sure of their motive. Maybe they're being blackmailed by the tigered cops like the lead investigator of my case is. Maybe they took a bribe. Maybe they are afraid to be targeted. Maybe they want to keep these remotely used weapons, satellite tracking technologies, mind control weapons, secret from the public because it is outrageous that cops or anyone shoots, injures, tortures, incriminates, and kills people with these. How is you talking to PC Marshman so that he will have my case transferred to another cop related to you, Mayor, stopping some of these hate crimes, police shootings, stabbings, suicides, and lots of other crimes in Portland? It is related because they are the same perpetrators, some of them, some tigered cops. They talk to me every day. They say they love to harass and torture people, and they love to taunt people with evidence about these crimes. I don't mean that the people charged with or involved in these crimes had any kind of agreement with those cops. I mean that the cops used them, forced them, voice-to-skull them to do some of those crimes. Some tiger cops injure, incriminate lots of people remotely. They give people subliminal orders to do whatever they want them to do, to say whatever they want them to say. Cops have had these weapons more than 20 years. They sign a confidentiality agreement to not talk to the public about them, but some do. They're supposed to use them mainly to de-escalate violent behavior. They're very dangerous when used to abuse people. And lastly, there's probable cause to have those 8 to 10 at least tigered cops investigated, put under surveillance, and prosecuted for some of these crimes, including murders. They will then be less likely to continue to do more or as many crimes. That's all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next item, please.
Item 611, request of Danny Robbins to address council regarding Portland Police Reform Policy.
Morning.
Hello, my name is Danny Robbins. Mayor Wheeler, you promised the city a national search for a reform-experienced police chief. You campaigned heavily on this idea of police reform in Portland. It's the reason you got those votes. I understand that the interim police chief, as an interim chief, is not expected or maybe not even allowed to enact serious and changing reforms. But at the very least, we expect him not to push things in a direction towards less accountability. Yes. in regards to police killings and overuse of force, excessive use of force by the police, you have the power to change this. Perhaps the sole power rests in your hands. Your legacy, and let me remind you, your political future will rely on how you handle this decision and if you follow through on your promises. When the investigation wasn't even finished and you told us that Marshman was still in the running to be hired as a long-term police chief, everybody he spoke to was flabbergasted. Not just radicals, but everybody in the city. Everybody. 1 month before the Max stabbings on 82nd Avenue, the murderer, along with a group including open white nationalists, was offered a free shuttle back to their cars after your police force commandeered a TriMet bus for them. If I was going to a climate march or a peace and anti-war march, I would certainly feel empowered and emboldened if the police commandeered a bus for me to ride in. Wouldn't you? I'm sorry, but you have to do something to turn this path around, Mr. Mayor, making our community safer. The responsibility will lie on you.
Thank you. Could I briefly respond? First of all, there's been lots of discussion about the shuttles around the Montevilla issue. One can disagree with whether or not that was the right call at that time. And obviously, as the police commissioner, I don't call tactics. I can tell you why they made the decision, and you can either like it or dislike it, and that's certainly your right. They were at the park. There was a group of protesters and a group of counter-protesters. And by the way, I was not shaking hands with either protesters or counter-protesters. I was there. No, you did not. Excuse me, you did not. Hear me out. I was there to shake hands with the police officers. I oversee that bureau. And so what happened was then people started marching down 82nd Avenue. They marched a considerable distance away from Montevilla. I was not there at that time, but what I heard was they got quite far from their cars. Willamette Week, I believe, covered that portion of the event. And the decision was made, either let them walk back to their cars or get them out of the neighborhood quickly. The decision was made. You can disagree with that. I'm just telling you why the decision was made. The decision was made to get them out of the neighborhood, get them back to their cars, and have them go home to de-escalate that event. You can disagree with that, but that is fine. That's fine. But that was the decision that was made. With regard to the police chief search, that is still very much underway, and it will be wrapped up in mid-July. We are collecting the application packets now. There is a process that will unfold between now and the end of July, and you can certainly and absolutely should hold me accountable for the choices I make during that process. That process, I agree with you, is a seminal decision node for me as mayor. That's why I insisted on it, by the way, against a
undermined when you said that
considerable...
Marshman was still in the running.
He has every
undermined.
right to apply for that position, as does anybody else who meets the minimum qualifications under city charter. And that's the fact. So that's it. So all I'm asking you
Just please
is,
do
I'm
right by
hearing
us,
what you're
Mr. Mayor.
saying. Give me a chance to actually do these things that I'm in the process of doing. And you can hold me accountable for it after the fact.
You haven't held him accountable for the mistakes he's made. In fact, you undermined the investigation against him.
Thank you. Okay, and I hear what you're saying. I just wanted you to hear my response. Thank you for your testimony. Next item, please.
Item 612, request of Stan Herman to address council regarding getting an answer to a question presented 5 months ago.
Mr. Herman? Next item, please.
Item 613, request of Tara Clausen to address council regarding pet discrimination in rentals.
Is Tara here today? I'm sorry, next item.
Item 614, request of injured to address council regarding reverse Polish logic, Part 3.
Morning.
Good morning. My
Morning, sir.
name's Injured and Pissed Off.
Again,
Of course,
folks,
I
please.
brought this paper. It was printed August 9th, 2006. Willamette Week wrote it. And they titled it as Uninvited Guest. I'm the reason why people have to wait a month or more to sign up to speak. Willamette Week printed the article, and it sure had a bunch of bull in it. Everybody speaking here today was called by their first and last name except for myself, and I'll be addressing that July 17th here with papers that I provided. And Mayor Wheeler, if you recall, I spoke at the county commissioners across the river June 1st, and I wanted to submit this
Yes, sir.
paper. It's a domestic violence. And of course, as I said at the meeting, that after 7 dog attacks in my building that the city owns, that I was attacked since December 3rd of 2004, and this article was written in August 9th of 2006. That's 20 months, but they never mentioned the 4 dog attacks that I had then. And then, of course, you yourself wrote this letter January 16th of 2007, and that's only 5 months from this article, and that was the 5th dog attack. And then I had 2 more dog attacks, and the last one, well, I broke my left hip and fractured 2 of my vertebrae in my spinal cord. A whole lot of fun there. And that's animal control, and of course I went to court during the 6th dog attack and met with the district attorney that morning, and he dismissed the case saying that, oh, she really didn't mean it. And he was well aware of the facts. They'll never prosecute that person, and I'll never get justice of any type from Multnomah County because of the lies and misrepresentation. My service animal was a real service animal, not a pet. And of course, I suffered major injuries. And Deborah Kafori's uncle, of all things, was my lawyer, and she wrote the Oregon State Bar, Deborah Kafori, that I was bad-mouthing them, and they agreed to dismiss the case. And a civil liability has no statute of limitations.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Have any items been pulled from the consent agenda, Carla?
Yes, we have 624, 629, 630, 632, and 633.
632 and 633. All right, 2 items have been, let's see, 633, let's see, that has been pulled for public discussions. Okay, very good.
Excuse me, could I ask Carl to just give that list again? Could you just say the numbers again, please?
That's 624, 629, 630, 632, and 633.
Thank you.
Very good. Could you call the roll, please, on the remainder of the consent agenda?
Fish,
Aye.
Saltzman. Aye. Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. The first time certain item, please, 615.
establish a Smart Cities Steering Committee to create a citywide governance structure for the city's smart cities work.
Colleagues, since 2014, the City of Portland has been actively seeking to leverage innovative technologies and the uses of data to meet cities' goals around equity, transportation, sustainability, climate change, and disaster recovery and resiliency. In 2016, Portland was one of 7 finalist cities in the United States Department of Transportation's Smart Cities Challenge, and that was an effort to mobilize folks from across the city and across the region to pursue so-called smart cities solutions to address some of our most pressing transportation issues. Since that time, we've moved forward on a number of the ideas in the Smart Cities Challenge proposal. We've also started to look at how we can broaden this beyond just transportation and look at emergency management, energy, civic engagement, and other areas of opportunity. For these efforts to succeed, we think it's very important that we coordinate this work across different bureaus here at the City of Portland, and that we identify our shared goals and our cases for technology, as well as developing centralized systems, managing policy development projects, and looking for joint funding opportunities. This resolution seeks to identify a smart city steering committee that would be made up of representatives from multiple bureaus as well as commissioner's offices, including the mayor's office. The committee will be led by the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability in partnership with the Portland Bureau of Transportation, the Bureau of Technology Services, and the Office of Community Technologies. Representatives of these 3 bureaus are here to outline our smart cities work to date, as well as talk about how the steering committee could help guide these efforts moving forward. We have Susan Anderson, Leah Treat, Jeff Baer, and Kevin Martin are all going to give us presentations here today. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Susan is actually out sick today, so I'm going to read her remarks. She wishes she could be here.
Thank you.
I'm Kevin Martin. I'm with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I manage the technical and smart cities teams there. Thank you for having us. So Susan's remarks. So we are here today to establish a Smart Cities Steering Committee. The mayor asked the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability to lead this effort and build on our role as a convener and facilitator for many citywide efforts. In particular, this group will really help us to collaborate and be proactive and help leverage each other's efforts. There's so many data, technology, and smart cities efforts among the bureaus right now, but also with PSU, other universities, other cities, and the private sector and other organizations. And this is a great opportunity to bring it all together. Over the past couple of years, as we've looked at similar efforts by other communities, we've mostly seen a focus on technology, infrastructure, and some city services. We hope to broaden that perspective to include equity, resiliency, affordability, and the impacts of climate change. We all know that technology is changing rapidly. It continues to be transformative, and it's not just our phones and gadgets. Technology is affecting how and where we live. It's affecting how we get around, and even where and what kind of work we do. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity to work with my colleagues on this. The bureaus have actually been meeting informally for more than a year. I think formalizing the committee will make us more efficient and provide us with more opportunities for partnership with the private sector. With that, I'll turn it over to Director Treat from the Portland Bureau of Transportation for her remarks.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayor and Commissioners. This resolution is an important step forward in our efforts to take advantage of the most advanced technologies, to make our streets safer, and to make it easier for Portlanders to get from place to place. Coordination and collaboration have been key to our success so far. We were a Smart City finalist in large part because we assembled a broad coalition of public and private sector partners from across our region. And thanks to this collaboration, we were able to offer a compelling vision of a safer, more efficient, and above all, more equitable transportation future for our city. Since the conclusion of the Smart City Challenge, we have been building on those relationships as we implement central parts of our Smart City vision. We have, for example, these relationships have been an important source of information and expertise as we have followed the Mayor and Commissioner Saltzman's directive to develop a policy framework for introducing autonomous vehicles into the city. And we're going to be coming to you next week with the key elements of this initiative. This truly is a watershed moment for our city. We are continuing to grow at a rapid clip, and while this growth has fueled our local economy, it is also putting significant strains on our system. And we need to ensure that the safety of our consumers and users is adequately protected and a top priority as we integrate the latest innovations into our system. No one bureau or office can achieve these goals, and we need to work together. And that's why I'm supportive of the resolution. It puts in place an efficient and effective framework for citywide collaboration, and I believe it will ensure that we innovate faster and better together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor Wheeler, members of City Council. I'm Jeff Bear with the Bureau of Technology Services, and we too are here to support the adoption of this resolution and have been actively engaged in these discussions over the past year, as Kevin alluded to, about the Smart Cities initiative. And providing this framework for this will establish the necessary structure to strategically move this forward in a very focused manner. And we in BTS, or Technology Services, have a large group of very talented individuals who have been working on a number of related smart city applications and open data initiatives such as civic apps you've probably heard about, or Safe Routes to School, PDX Reporter, Waterworks, just to name a few. And we can leverage that talent to work within this framework and collaborate with a wider spectrum of bureaus. And I want to specifically thank Kevin for his leadership and efforts to coordinate this, and also Director Treat to support the transportation initiative, and also with BPS as well. And we look forward to providing our continued involvement in helping Portland continue to progress on being a smart city, a smart community. And with that, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity and to provide our support for this, and look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I want to invite up Julie Omelchek from the Office for Community Technology.
Good morning. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm Julie Omelchuk, Program Manager with the Office for Community Technology, and we too are very pleased to be part of this resolution today. As you know, video, Internet of Things, and now Smart Cities applications have all driven the need for robust wireless and broadband infrastructure available to all. With Council's leadership, the Office for Community Technology has an extended history and deep knowledge of shepherding use by communications companies of the city's rights-of-way and public access for public good. As the lead city office for both the Portland Broadband Strategic Plan and the Digital Equity Action Plan, OCT is pleased to be part of this Smart City Steering Committee and wholeheartedly supports passage of this resolution. We look forward to continue working with other lead city bureaus on the Smart City challenges and initiatives. And I too would like to thank Kevin Martin for his leadership in this area, and councils as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for your service.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to do a quick presentation, just give a high-level overview of sort of where the city is with smart cities and kind of the role of this steering committee. I'm going to switch seats so I can run the computer over there. Thank you, Carla. So the first question is, what is a smart city? And the definition we've given people is it's one where data and technology are used to improve people's lives. And really, Portland from the beginning has focused on improving the lives of those in underserved communities, and really starting to think through how we can use these opportunities around technology and data to correct some of the inequities that are there now, to even out some of our infrastructure investments, and to really start bringing services and information to the people that need it most, where it will have the most impact on their lives. And I think that's something that's really set Portland apart from a lot of other cities, is that focus on equity and the focus on that, on the community. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited to be a part of this effort. What types of technology and data are we talking about? It's not 100% clear what makes a technology smart, but I think we have a pretty good idea of what that bucket includes. As Director Treat mentioned, autonomous vehicles is obviously a big part of this. It's a very disruptive technology that is coming, whether we want it to or not. Connected vehicles and the infrastructure that's going to be needed there in terms of connectivity and infrastructure on our streetlights and signals to facilitate those vehicles moving through our right-of-way is a huge component of this work moving forward. We have an open data program now that was adopted here at City Council back on May 5th. We definitely see that as falling under the Smart Cities umbrella, how we make data more accessible to the community, how we make it more accessible to city staff, how we make it more accessible to you all in terms of informing your decision-making. Internet of Things, they're predicting, I think, 50 billion internet-connected devices by 2030. How we use those as a city and how we really think through the implications of just a greatly increased system for data collection and protect our our residents' privacy and use that information to meet our city goals, I think is obviously a huge part of this conversation. Public Wi-Fi and how we bring connectivity to people that don't have it now, that may have a smartphone but don't have a data plan or don't have internet access in their home. That's a piece of this. Systems and apps to integrate civic services, so things like TriMet's mod sandbox that they're working on that will integrate different transit choices and transportation choices into a single application that people can use to get from point A to point B. Kiosks and street-level engagement with our residents and what kind of services we bring to the street using those kinds of devices. Tools to integrate and analyze data and inform our decisions. I think all of these things are sort of what we're talking about when we're talking about smart cities. I call this graphic the flower of opportunity. It just sort of indicates that when we're talking about data and technology, all these different realms overlap, and there's a lot of shared goals. And as you get to the center of this graphic, you start looking at, maybe perhaps a single technology that can meet the goals of, our transportation goals, our housing goals, our equity goals, our public safety goals. Really finding those synergies is one of the reasons we want to set up this Smart City Steering Committee so that we have a place for that high-level coordination. Transportation is driving a lot of things right now for all the reasons that Director Treat mentioned. One of the big ones is that we went after the $50 million U.S. Department of Transportation grant a little over a year ago. We didn't end up getting that money. Columbus, Ohio did. We can all theorize as to the reasons why. But I think what's interesting is that Portland continues to be looked at as a leader, including by Columbus. And folks are looking at Portland to kind of guide how other cities govern smart cities and what they do with these technologies and how they prepare for these technologies. Really, our goal is ultimately to broaden beyond transportation to housing, land use, emergency management, et cetera. And, when you look at some of the things we're talking about, autonomous vehicles, I'll come back to again and again because I think that's, again, a very disruptive technology that really isn't, the conversation really isn't about if, but when and how that's going to be implemented. It touches on transportation, obviously, but there's huge implications to housing as you start looking at a world where there is greatly fewer parking spaces needed. As we look at a world where people are much easily and more cheaply able to get from point A to point B and how that sort of interacts with our transit system, there's land use implications, there's housing implications, there's certainly safety implications, there's emergency management implications. So autonomous vehicles touches on everything. And it's really on us as a city, I think, to figure out how we're going to guide these technologies that are coming, whether we like them to or not, to meet our city goals.
So I'm just wondering,
Sure.
the fact that transportation, land use, and to a lesser extent, emergency management are all bolded there, but equity, housing, and public safety are kind of pale.
Yeah.
Does that reflect the intended direction of this?
It doesn't. That's just choices by the graphic designer who made the graphic. There's a couple of things that will change about this graphic over time, that being one of them, and also that I think equity, it is sort of a separate piece, but it's also something that should be involved with all of these realms. So it's not only do we have goals that are sort of specific around equity, but we want to look at all of these realms, transportation, land use, through an equity lens. So it's really integrated into everything.
And I'm also not seeing anything about community engagement. I'll have some more questions about that later, but
Yeah.
it seems like the intent initially is to have just the internal staff working on this. Is that correct?
No, well, I think where we have been to date is really focused pretty internally, but we're now starting to pivot to how we bring this to the community and really how do we involve the community in the decisions that we make going forward. And really, how do we start to get a better handle on what the community needs are? When we start talking about things like autonomous vehicles and first last mile, how do we know that we are really targeting these things to meet the needs of the community? And I think there's a huge community engagement piece around that.
Thank you.
If I could comment on that, we don't have our internal house in order yet. And so the focus of this particular part of the process really is, in my mind, it's internal. It's making sure that we have our bureau infrastructure integrated and working together on the same goals, sharing the opportunities around the technology, identifying the technology and where the opportunities are. And so having that platform in place, I think, is an essential ingredient before we even begin to talk about how best to engage the community. That, to me, is while it is certainly related, and this tees up the beginning of that process, this really is, I believe, the major thrust is internal.
I think that's exactly right. You're exactly right. It's getting our internal house in order so that we can begin that larger community process. And really, by creating this platform and this committee, I think we sort of, solved two problems. We get our internal house in order, and we also have a platform for those larger community discussions and for partnerships with the private sector and academia and nonprofits.
But this in and of itself is not the community engagement plan around smart cities.
It's not.
I want to be very clear about
yes.
that.
The steering committee would hopefully be involved with drafting that plan, but this is not the community engagement piece of our smart cities work.
Well, I would suggest that including at least some of the committees or commissions that we've got early in the start to help figure that out. When we set up the Office of Equity and Human Rights, we started with a huge community engagement process, which then told us focus internally. But that was only once everybody had come to the conclusion of what is the challenges. So, for instance, the Public Engagement Advisory Committee, the Portland Commission on Disability, the New Portlanders Policy Council, Open Signal. It seems like all those communities, but some of them, those are mixed city staff and community. But all of them, I would suggest, need to have input into what should we work on, not just on how should we work on it.
Yeah, I agree. So this next graphic sort of starts to get at sort of that outside coordination a little bit, with the city of Portland at the top and academia, nonprofit, other governments, and the private sector. We know that the smart cities work is going to require coordination and partnerships with external entities. We don't build technology in the city. We need the private sector. We need to leverage their technologies. We don't really have the internal research capacity that they do at, say, Portland State University, who we have a very strong partnership. And so really figuring out how we leverage those partnerships. We need community groups and other nonprofits to engage the community and assess their needs. And everyone sort of needs us, the city. The city has a lot of leverage in these conversations. Many of these technologies are emerging, and the private sector is really trying to be first out of the gate. And to be successful in their endeavors, they need access to our city infrastructure, so our streetlights, our signals, our right-of-way. And so the city has really a lot of leverage to drive this conversation. And ultimately, it's us that represents the community's interests. And I think, again, we have sort of a window of opportunity, I think, over the next 3 to 5 years as some of these very quickly changing technologies and very disruptive technologies come online to really represent the community's interests and shape these things in a way that meets the community's needs. And so, I think the next 3 to 5 years is going to be a very exciting time in the city and in this realm, and I look forward to seeing what Portland does to really represent the community's interests. This is just a timeline we put together. I think you have a hard copy of it in front of you. I know it's very hard to read on the screen. But just to indicate that we've been doing this since 2014. Really, one of the first things the city was involved with was a partnership with the National Institute of Standards Technology Global Cities Team Challenge, which we are still involved with. We have an expo in Washington, D.C. in August that we're participating in. That was way back in 2014, so this is not a really new conversation. Smart cities has been sort of on our tongues for a long time, and BPS has had a role in that. But everything changed really in December of 2015 with the US DOT Smart Cities Challenge. Putting that proposal together really brought together a whole bunch of pieces, both internally and externally, and really it's that coordination that we want to build on with the steering committee. This is just a very partial list of things that are happening as we speak. As Director Treat mentioned, we've got a Smart Autonomous Vehicles Initiative, which will actually be in front of City Council next Wednesday. The work that PBOT is doing in this realm, really focusing on it from a policy perspective and how this will impact people's lives, rather than looking at it from sort of more of a technical perspective, is leading. And other cities are looking to us to see how we sort of roll out autonomous vehicles. So that's very exciting. Open data program I already mentioned. We've got an air quality sensor deployment that BPS is leading. Christine Kendrick on my team, who has her PhD out of PSU and had done a lot of air quality work there. Smart connected air quality sensors, we'll be deploying 10 of those throughout the city as sort of a pilot test of that technology. We've got a regional smart cities action plan that we're working on in partnership with PBOT, PSU, Metro, TriMet, and ODOT to sort of set what the regional vision is. We've got a partnership with AT&T, GE, and Intel to potentially deploy some sensors to count pedestrians, look at pedestrian, where they are and how they're using our infrastructure. We've got a proposal in to develop a centralized data system for managing data that's coming from all these various devices and from autonomous vehicles. That's a partnership with PSU, BTS, and PBOT. We've got a pilot of a kiosk system that's meant to assist with folks after a disaster. That's a partnership with PBEM, BPS, PSU, and MIT. And
What does
MIT
PrEP stand for?
What's that?
What does PrEP stand for?
I don't know if that's an acronym. That's a good question. I think it's just preparation.
Okay. Thank you.
It's really interesting. There's a lot of opportunity. MIT is really interested in Portland being one of the first cities to deploy that technology, and they're very interested in our beacon sites, which I can't remember what that acronym stands for off the top of my head, but it's the places where people gather after a natural disaster. We're looking at a TGM grant, I think that was on consent agenda today, to develop our own City of Portland Smart Cities plan with PBOT and BPS partnering on that. We're looking at a pilot of a sort of shared economy application in town called Josephine that allows home cooks to basically distribute meals. That's a partnership between BPS and the mayor's office, and was really focused on how do we start developing data sharing agreements with these sort of disruptive private technologies that allow the city to evaluate how they're impacting our residents and how the city can capitalize on that information to sort of meet our city goals. So that's all the stuff that's happening now. And because of that, we've evolved. So we've been doing this since 2014. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff now. We started uncoordinated and sort of reacting. I think right now we've gotten a lot more coordinated. We've got the bones of the steering committee together. We're all talking to one another. We've had a great last few months talking with BTS, PBOT, and BPS, really figuring out who's on first, who's leading what. I think we have a pretty admirable collaboration in place. So I think our level of coordination is actually sort of the envy of many other cities. We're still a little bit reactive. We're not really driving the conversation. We're still sort of reacting to it. I think over the next few months, that's really what we want to try to do with this committee, is really start to get out in front of, again, these potentially disruptive technologies. And what does it mean to be proactive? It means, what are our assets? How ready are they for these technologies? How do we evaluate potential partnerships with the private sector and others? Using RFIs and other means to gather information from the private sector so we know what's out there, and we can sort of guide it into our own city goals, and then prioritizing work based on our city goals. recognizing all throughout that technology is a means to the end, it's not the end itself. And so, the driver in these conversations should be our city goals, not the technology, and really shaping that technology so that it helps us do what we want to do as a city and helps us become a better city. Again, we have leverage, and I think we have a 3 to 5 year window where cities are really going to be able to dictate how these technologies are deployed. And then finally, we've had, some of you may have seen this graphic floating around. This is kind of our smart cities governance concept, how we're going to organize as a city. The steering committee is at the center, and then that steering committee is informed by all our guiding plans. That's the Portland Plan, Comprehensive Plan, Digital Equity Action Plan, Climate Action Plan, Transportation Systems Plan. How we use all those plans and the goals in those plans to inform our smart cities work, which should really be driven by those plans. Smart cities isn't a thing in and of itself. It's really a means to meet our city goals with technology and data. How we
And
interact
if I
with...
could just interrupt for one
Sorry.
second, I'm sorry to do that. But to Commissioner Frisch's suggestion, this is another great way to engage the communities that are already engaged around those plans, that have put a ton of work into them and know them inside and out. So that's another good potential overlap with this process.
Yeah, really building on the work that we've done already and organizing it is key.
Yeah, it's not just the plan, not just what's on paper, but
Right.
you guys have worked hard for years to build communities around the development of those plans, so let's leverage those communities.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I think BPS is leading this effort is, the effort that went into, say, the Portland Plan and all the relationships that were built there and the community engagement. We want to build on that. And then we also have other committees that touch on this stuff in the city, like the Technology Executive Steering Committee, and we will have a strong relationship with that committee to make sure that we are looking at potentially enterprise technology solutions. We have a regional smart cities group, which is led by Portland State University, that we're involved with. There's a private smart cities lab led by the Technology Association of Oregon and Skip Newberry there. That represents the local technology firms. We're heavily involved with that. And then we have the beginnings of a bunch of working groups around data analysis, sensors and IoT, AV, autonomous vehicles, energy, public safety, and then civic platforms and apps, where all these sort of projects live that will be organized underneath the steering committee.
So I'm also not seeing on there anything about equity. And where would the consideration for people with disabilities, which the working groups would they be included in?
Again, and I think equity is sort of an ingrained piece in all of this, and perhaps we need to communicate that a little better in say, a graphic like this. But
well, what we found when we were doing the Portland Plan and the Comprehensive Plan, yes, it's all encompassing. We want people to have it, but unless you've got a specific working group or reminding everybody. That's
right.
Why we had a separate set of policies on equity, as well as it being infused to the rest of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I think we need part of the task we'll have as a steering committee is to figure out how to address it. And so I don't think we have an answer yet, but I think that we want to make that a core piece of what we do, and how that's sort of implemented. I mean, I've heard two different schools of thought that by sort of having a separate equity work group, it kind of puts it off on the side. We want it to be more ingrained in everything we do. And so, maybe the question is how we engage those who are working on equity in the city in this steering committee, I think is a good question.
Yes, I think so. And you started with especially considering historically underserved communities,
right.
Knowing that our bureau directors don't reflect the demographics of our directors don't reflect the city we serve, and in fact worse than last year. How are you going to make sure that there are people from those historically underserved communities actually on the steering committee helping to guide what goes forward?
I think that's something that we need to figure out as a committee, how we're going to engage the community, and really how we're going to potentially use new forms of data and information to kind of identify where that community is and what their needs are, I think is part of the conversation as well.
Well, I think definitely under the New Portlanders and the other communities of colour, but also especially for people with disabilities, the transportation aspects being at the top and in bold, that clearly affects people with disabilities
Yeah,
lot.
and if you, and I don't want to speak on behalf of transportation, but one of the first sort of use cases for autonomous vehicles is looking at paratransit, for example, which is very expensive. You know, how we initially address the needs of folks that say the existing bus services don't meet those needs, I think is perhaps one of the first use cases we want to address with things like automated vehicles and first mile, last mile solutions that they provide.
Well, knowing your director, Leah Treat, and her commitment, which she's demonstrated since she's become the director, I know you will continue to do that. I saw on the consent agenda today, I don't know whether it was one of those which was pulled, but there's a pilot of providing the Bike Town program to people with disabilities, and so I was really happy to see that. Again, if we don't call it out, it's liable to get missed, or we're liable to include people when it's really too late for them to engage and direct things.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. So that's all I had to say.
Mayor, I have a couple
Commissioner
questions.
Fish,
Could
you
we
bet.
ask Leah to come back? So I have 3 questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
The first is, look forward 10 years. And we've talked about getting in front of disruptive technology. We've talked about harnessing new technologies. These are all very high-level concepts. How will any of this benefit the average person living in our community in 10 years?
Well, you know, there's a lot of different theories. The hope that people are attached to is that, at least from the transportation perspective, if we look at autonomous vehicles, in a 10-year time frame, perhaps we'll get to congestion relief. Because it's going to take some time for people to give up their personal vehicles, and that's going to be a generational change. So you'll start seeing that happen over the next 10 years. Autonomous vehicles, hopefully, are going to be safer because they are not impaired, they're not speeding, and they follow all the traffic laws. We also hope that autonomous vehicles are going to be providing mobility solutions for people in underserved areas who have lack of transit-rich environment, et cetera. So that's what we hope to see over the next 10 years, and why the private sector is investing so heavily in this is that's the aim. I personally, my sentiment or thought is it's going to take probably 15 years till we hit that tipping point, or perhaps more. It's also going to greatly impact our infrastructure, transportation. In the next 10 to 20 years, our largest funding source, in addition to the gas tax, is parking revenue. And autonomous vehicles or any kind of autonomous mobility solutions have the possibility to greatly carve into parking revenue because it won't be necessary anymore. So we need to be thinking extensively about how we're going to fund transportation infrastructure as we think about these disruptive technologies that are coming.
So that's helpful, and I think we ought to continue to work to be able to describe this and the community benefits in plain English, because I think when we start using terms like smart cities, I think it excludes most people.
Yeah.
And that the assumption is that any questions you have about it means you're part of the dumb cities movement, right, as opposed to understanding what is a smart city and how does it actually benefit a person.
Yeah.
Because at my prism on all this stuff is how is someone who lives here benefited from this?
Right.
Not how do we leverage technology per se, but how does that improve the quality of life of someone who lives here?
That's really
The second
good
question
feedback.
I have is, because your presentation talks so much about disruptive technology, I'm obliged to just note that the last time someone came into Portland with a so-called disruptive technology, it was Uber. And the track record of Uber is they came in and ran over regulators and ran over consumers. What assurances do we have through this process, particularly with companies like Uber and others looking at autonomous vehicles, that we're going to be regulating ahead of the curve and not dealing with rogue actors?
Quite frankly, we don't have those assurances in place. Uber and Lyft, the TNC market is linked up with the big auto industry. So Ford, GM, and BMW are the 3 largest financial backers of the autonomous vehicle initiative, and they are linked up with Uber and Lyft, and they are working very hard at the federal level to get federal preemption, so even states could not regulate their own markets, much less they're also working working at the state level to try to preempt at the state level for localities, to have local regulations. So it's something that we really need to stay on top of and be mindful of.
So since you mentioned that, we did as a council oppose Uber's effort to preempt all local regulations of TNCs. Is there something in this legislative session that has been filed which would preempt cities and localities from regulating autonomous vehicles?
Yes, there has, and it failed.
Okay, good. So when you say that there'll be an effort to preempt at the federal and state level, we know these large companies are very successful at doing that. And we also know that one of the primary drivers that we're hearing about with this technology is that by taking a driver out of the car, they lower their costs. That's not just disruptive, that may actually be catastrophic to the workplace, and there also raises, in my mind, safety issues. Do we have the authority to mandate that even with autonomous vehicles, there be a driver?
There's nothing, to my knowledge, there's nothing that precludes a local government to stipulate that in our code. I think that's a question for the attorneys that can tell you it doesn't exist now.
So, Mayor, I'm going to, looking at what is happening in Singapore and other places where these companies have come in on a very aggressive timeline to put autonomous in and then promptly move to driverless, I think, and given our experience with Uber and the way they push the envelope, I think I would ask that that be addressed at the front end of this process. And my sense is that if we're very assertive and aggressive about requiring a driver in an autonomous vehicle early on, at least we have the leverage to make sure that we get it right as it unfolds. And so that's my third point. And my final point, I just want to acknowledge, is that your steering committee contains government agencies, utilities companies, and I know, it has TriMet, it makes sense, PGE, Daimler, that makes sense. I'm assuming they're going to be doing autonomous trucks. Uber, are Lyft and taxis on that steering committee?
No.
So why have we chosen the worst actor in the industry to be on the steering committee and not Lyft or taxis?
So the steering committee is just made up of internal staff. We have relationships with outside committees like the Regional Smart Cities Group and the Private Smart Cities Lab, where those folks are participating. But our steering committee is really meant to be an internal place for coordination. And so currently it involves BPS, PBOT, PBEM, OCT, BTS, the Prosper Portland, the Portland Housing Bureau, representatives from the mayor's office, representatives from Commissioner Saltzman's office, and representatives from Commissioner Udaley's office. And we hope to expand that to include other folks in the city as well. But for now, the steering committee is an internal.
Okay, so we're doing this in phases. Do I have your assurance that when you are engaging external stakeholders, both Lyft and traditional taxis will be given the same standing as Uber as part of a stakeholder process?
I think that's the intention. And
Well, sir, it's an easy question.
Yeah. Yes.
Good intentions. Is that a yes or a no?
That's yes.
Okay. And so, Mayor, I'll be looking to see, I would hope we would publish a list at the appropriate time that has all the stakeholders. And I would like to see the taxi industry given full standing. And I would also, frankly, I don't use Uber for all the obvious reasons. I have started using Lyft, particularly when I have no other option.
Right.
And I have found them reliable and professional. And frankly, their business practices, to me, are discernibly different than Uber.
Yeah.
But I think they all need to be at the table if we're going to get this right.
Yeah, and I think just briefly, one of the first tasks of the steering committee is to lay out sort of what we're calling a playbook. Other cities have done this as well, and that's really how do we lay out sort of the lanes for the private sector to engage with the city, and how do we make it consistent and vendor agnostic so that everybody has the same opportunity, and we're consistent with our engagement with the various private sector players, and we've let them know, okay, if you want to work with the city, here's what our goals are, here's what we want to accomplish, here's how you engage with us. And I also think, just wanted to reiterate your point, these technologies, again, are coming whether we want them to or not. If we do nothing, there are potentially very negative implications to some of these technologies, like autonomous vehicles. We could see significant increases in vehicle trips, and we could see significant decreases in transit ridership, for example, and how we as a city really lay down the policies. And that's where I think PBOT is doing such innovative work to sort of prevent the dystopian future that could be a possibility if we do nothing. So I think looking at this from some of these outcomes can be negative if the city is not proactive is a place that we're really wanting the steering committee to come from.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
May I?
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you. And I want to pick up on one of Commissioner Fisher's first points, which was about the value to the community member. Commissioner Daly is out of the country on city business, but if she was here, I'm sure she would express concern about the capacity of the one city staff person who is responsible for talking to people in the community about equity, which is Ashley Horn, in her leadership staffing of the Public Involvement Advisory Committee. So I'm concerned about, I didn't see either the Office of Neighbourhood Involvement or the Office of Equity and Human Rights on any of those, here's the projects we're doing. And I also, I know.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good feedback. I think our intentions are there, and we have failed to communicate it in our graphics and our presentation, so thank you, and we will expand upon that.
Well, if it is supposed to be just city staff, I guess my point is I don't think Ashley has any more capacity to attend to another major project. So I would encourage you to broaden the steering committee to include community members who can provide a perspective that, to my knowledge, there aren't people in the city, and if there are, they're already overtaxed and can't possibly add this major thing. The other thing I wanted to pick up from what Commissioner Fish talked about was just considering what are the long-term impacts, and I'm thinking particularly of isolation, where I can foresee if some of this technology keeps coming down the line, a person won't be able to talk to another person all day unless they happen to have a cell phone and they want to engage because it's all on Facebook, and order your taxi or your autonomous vehicle remotely, order your groceries delivered to your door by somebody, or maybe even by a robot. We've got to be thinking about how we're going to keep a sense of community, and how, while we want to broaden the folks who give us input and are involved in our community decisions, how do we make sure that there's occasionally time for people to interact with another human being?
Yeah.
So I'd urge you to make sure that that is part of the steering committee's charge. And then secondly, again, from Commissioner Fish, looking at the jobs that could be lost, and how are we going to make sure that, like clean energy, there are more jobs in clean energy than there are in coal, for example. How can we how do we address the fact that some of these proposals will put people out of work, and what are they going to do, especially if they're in a more practical, hands-on job, rather than something that requires a 4-year degree?
Agreed.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any further questions? And you don't have any other invited panel guests, is that my understanding? Correct. How many people are signed up for public testimony, Carla?
We have 8.
We have 8. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the first 3, please come on up, are Samuel Pastrick, Leif Hansen, and Carol Studemund.
Good morning, and just a review, 3 minutes, 2.5 in, the yellow light blinks, 3 minutes in, the red light goes crazy. All testimony must be related to the matter before us. Thank you.
I should be able to hit 2 minutes on the head.
Perfect, go for it. And
Good morning.
name for the record, sorry.
My name is Sam Pastrick. I'm a consumer advocate with Oregon Citizens Utility Board, and I'm here today to encourage adoption of the resolution to establish a Smart Cities Steering Committee. CUB is a utility customer advocate that works in the utility regulation arena and at federal, state, and local legislative levels on energy and telecom issues. Also, as you folks know, in 2014, Council invited CUB to serve as an independent and outside advocate for the city's public utility customers. CUB is also an active player in the Digital Inclusion Network, which is housed at the Office for Community Technology. I actually testified before Council in support of the Digital Equity Action Plan, or the DEEP, and pushed for open data language in the latest comp plan. On this, we were certainly heartened and pleased to see last month's open data ordinance. Last November, I presented an analysis expressing our concern, CUB's concern, with the city's approach to information and communications technology policy development, implementation, and oversight within the current governance structure. Among other options, that report suggested moving the non-revenue collection functions of OCT, that's the Office for Community Technology, into the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. This is why I'm so eager to convey our support for today's resolution, because it really speaks to BPS's unique expertise within the city and their commitment to reasserting Portland as a national leader in developing good public interest policy to underpin innovative or cutting-edge smart cities work. I want to make 3 additional points. The first is that I'm, of course, pleased to see that OCT has a role on the steering committee, and that Julie Olmachuk was included this morning on the presenting panel. Their involvement, OCT's involvement, really, in Cub's opinion, is imperative. I am, however, still deeply concerned with their low standing within the city's current governance structure. In fact, this point is the central thesis of our November paper and a forthcoming memo that we are preparing with our friends at the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, or MHCRC. So you folks should look for that memo soon. Finally, I also urge Council and BPS to consider input from MHCRC on the proposed steering committee and any future smart cities work. In closing, really, CUB does applaud BPS's leadership and supports the committee approach because we believe that it will provide a sorely needed forum to facilitate governance structure decisions aimed at building the best team possible to ensure future policy advances in this area. Thank you for your time and consideration, and of course, I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions.
Thank you. I'll just make a statement. I welcome your recommendations with regard to OCT.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it very much. Commissioner Fritz?
I do believe we'll have council's agreement with my amendment to have a budget note to say that there's not going to be an external evaluation of where it best resides. So I appreciate your
Commissioner
support
Fritz.
for that.
Good morning.
Good morning. Leif Hansen from the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission, MHCRC. Along with our colleagues at CUB, we're excited about and encourage the council to adopt the resolution to establish a Smart Cities Steering Committee. As you know, the Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission negotiates and enforces cable franchise agreements, manages the public benefit resources and assets derived from the franchises, and advocates on behalf of the public interest on communication issues at local, state, and federal levels. We serve the communities, residents, and local governments of Fairview, Gresham, Portland, Troutdale, and Wood Village, and Multnomah County. We contract with the City of Portland for our administrative and technical staff in the Office of Community Technology. That office also houses Portland's energy and utility franchising. We manage a considerable asset base on behalf of our jurisdictions, including the cable franchises, contracts with community access providers, and a 321-site institutional network that supports low-cost, high-capacity network services for public buildings and other technical functions throughout Multnomah County. Our team members at the Office for Community Technology manage a similarly valuable asset base via the energy and other utility franchises that they negotiate and manage. As the policy and technology landscape rapidly evolves, it's clear to us at MHCRC that the role and interaction between us and other city functions is increasingly critical. It's hard to imagine a smart cities initiative that does not integrate all of these functions, including those supported by MHCRC, and we're gratified that OCT is included as a key partner in the resolution. As Sam indicated, we will be following up with a joint CUB MHCRC memo outlining our mutual and strongly felt concerns about OCT's structural placement within the city, particularly in light of the centrality of the assets that they manage and the expertise and experience they bring to the Smart Cities Initiative. We hope to engage in further discussion with council on this topic. And again, thank you for the foresight in adopting the resolution that anticipates the convergence of urban planning, energy, transportation, and technology.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Carol Studenman. I'm currently the chair of the MHCRC, and I'm also the Multnomah County representative on the commission. The one thing I would like to add to Leif's comments is that the full membership of the MHCRC has expressed their support for this Smart Cities initiative. And the full membership is in agreement with CUB and our MHCRC colleagues representing Portland that the placement of OCT is not conducive to OCT's current work or the kind of creative, collaborative effort that will be essential to the Smart Cities initiative. We look forward to your thoughts on the forthcoming memo referenced by Sam and Leif. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, when can we look forward to receiving that?
I would say by early next week at the latest.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate
Perhaps
that.
earlier.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next 3, please.
Are Shedrick Wilkins, Mimi Gurman, and Star Stoffer.
Morning.
Good morning. Again, I'm Shedrick Wilkins, and about Intel and self-driving cars, I think computers should assist your driving but not control your driving. I like Multnomah County. When I was graduated from PSU, the internet hadn't gone, but I like the internet. Comcast, high-speed stuff. Wikipedia is an updated encyclopedia system. Everything I say is printed out there. I don't know if that's voice recognition, but that's great stuff. This is a smart city, okay? And if Washington County wants to have self-driving cars fly around hitting people, that's their problem, not my problem. And, if you're driving a car, you're held responsible. So you want to be kind of safe. So it's all right if these things are used to, like, slow the car down, but I'm not here to have cars driven. The airline industry and in the military, they have smart bombs that fly. They're the ones that pioneered this kind of stuff. But there's no planes flying around here without a pilot. Pilots have to deal with sick passengers. They have to deal with fuel consumption. They have to deal. Some pilots gun the runway. Air traffic controllers have to deal with people and stuff like that.
Well, Cedric, can I just make a comment? In planes that have technology, a pilot can put it on automatic pilot, but you still have a pilot in the cockpit getting ready to override if necessary or make adjustments. So you keep the human element, which is why, after all, a certain United airplane landed safely in the Hudson River. Without the human element, the plane cannot actually manage those kinds of challenges.
There was a 1993 experience. In 1993, IBM in the early 70s designed an air traffic control system that basically just sets off an alarm with basic computer chips at the time and says two planes are getting close to one another. And IBM insisted that there be an air traffic controller there. In 1993, Intel put one in Denver, Colorado that talks and stuff. The thing went down for 5 minutes, and because of Intel, there was no air traffic control system over Denver, Colorado.
Thank you.
Can I take his remaining time?
No.
My name is Mimi Gurman, and I would like to say that I find the name of this offensive, and I find it something to elevate Portland as a place that has a smart city, when in fact our city lobbed this at kids' heads on Sunday. This hit this child's head by the police on Sunday, but we're promoting a smart city. I take issue with the name. I think it's propaganda. We need to stop with the propaganda in our city. Portland has a lot of problems. Racism at its front end. This is for racism. It hit a black child in the face twice, 2 of these. There's still black dust from these. What the hell is this?
So,
in a smart city. This has to do with smart cities. Are you going to respond to what I'm saying?
It's not about policing. There will be a time and a place for that. Right now, we're talking about the Smart Cities Initiative. And the name came from the federal government. It came from Transportation Secretary Fox, who created the program under the Obama administration.
A smart city is one where data and technology are used to improve people's lives, especially those in historically underserved communities. This is propaganda. I won't have it in this city without at least being able, like I am right now, to stand up against this. My friend got shot in the mouth on Sunday with a tear gas canister from the police in this smart city. This is propaganda. All I'm saying is I'm addressing the title, I'm addressing the name of this entire program, Smart City, the city that works, propaganda. Enough with the propaganda. If you guys really want to get real about being a smart city, you'll start to accept what we're saying. Until you deal with getting rid of Chief Marshman, who lied on OPB yesterday for 15 minutes, and the cops came out and said, hey, we decided not to talk to you about what we did because there's chaos in the police ranks, because you're in charge and you don't know. This happens. Where would you be today if this little girl who got hit with 2 of these was killed on Sunday? we wouldn't be talking about a smart city today, or the need for $4 million more in target practice worth of bullets for the police.
Mimi, I have questions about Sunday, but again, this is not the time.
Smart city,
This is about
it's
a different
propaganda.
initiative.
It has nothing to do with the technology. What it does have to do with is, like Amanda Fritz said, where is the community involvement in this? Where's the black community involvement with this? Where are they saying, well, underserved neighborhoods? Who is representative of that? Propaganda needs to stop in Portland. Either we're going to become a good place to live or we're not. Stop lying about it.
Thank you. Good morning.
I have something extremely important. I'm Star Stoffer. In regards to technology and the way that we use it for public safety, I want to let you in on a little something that came upon me Sunday morning when Sergeant Nia texted me at home to tell me that his commitment was to arrest any alt-righters that tried to cross into Chapman. Then I watched as the Portland police, who clearly disobeyed the orders or pretended they had no knowledge, allowed these people into the park where we were anyway. I saw them abuse, scream, and shove women and young people who were trying to say, these people shouldn't be over here, they're dangerous. If we're going to talk about smart cities and technology and historically underserved communities, which AKA black people, AKA brown people, AKA Muslim people, AKA women, AKA disabled, AKA houseless, then you absolutely have to talk about all aspects of the safety that you're speaking about in regards to those communities. You don't get to cherry pick which things you speak about in regards to safety for those communities. On Sunday, one of your police officers shot me in the face with a little tear gas bullet. I have it, it is intact. If that thing had gone into my throat, if I didn't have a bandana and a gas mask shielding my mouth, I would be dead right now. And you're nothing but proud of the Portland police. I watched officers with no change of facial expression shoot in the back children that were trying to climb out of the parking garage. One of them had urinated himself. He was so afraid. And they shot him multiple times in the back until they fell. So don't sit up here with all your whiteness and all your privilege and your removed sense of self and relationship to this community and tell me or her or anybody sitting in the back that what we're talking about is something you have interest in. If you have interest in it, then you should set some time aside right now. Quit playing us with your words and do something meaningful. If you're interested, we're all sitting right here. What the hell's stopping you? This just happened. You don't get to determine as the aggressor when the victims of that aggression speak out against it.
Oh, listen, as the presiding, excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me. This is not the time or the place. My job is, excuse me.
Yeah, give me my fucking exclusion paper then. I'm gonna get my backpack. Where's the paper?
Let her get her backpack.
Yeah, touch me.
Next three, please.
You'll all be out of a fucking job.
The next two are Lenita James and Stan Schaefer.
Shame on all of you. You're all fucking cowards.
Good morning. And listen, folks, as the presiding officer, it is my responsibility, it is my responsibility to enforce council rules. You don't have to agree, but those are the rules.
Nazi cops, fire them!
Shot me in the fucking face!
He didn't throw me out yet.
Fire Captain Kruger,
Throw me out yet.
Let them stay.
Fire your Nazi cops!
Fire Captain Kruger!
All right, folks, we're going to take a recess. We're going to recess.
Tell them to
What? Please, yes. Thank you.
So I probably just represent the marginalized community in Portland when we say that that is not going to help us in any way, shape, form, or fashion. We need boots on the ground. I'm not going to sit here and say this whole speech was about the smart city thing because I really want to know why it was that you felt not compelled to come out and lace your Nikes up and stand on the front lines with the rest of us and say, not in our city. We all grew up here and we were there peacefully. I spent 24 hours at OHSU Hospital with my sister that you had ejected from Chambers. She's paralyzed on the left side and might not ever walk again. But I came down off that hill so that I could stand with the rest of Portland because most of us as Black community members were scared to show up. And I could not allow myself or my sister's voice to go unheard. And the question we had the most was, why weren't you out there? There was a peaceful rally right outside of City Hall. You could have laced up your Nikes, brought your wife and your daughter, and said, not in our town. Because you have a child, you have a duty as a parent, as a participant in the future of our whatever, to stand up and let your daughter see that you took a stand and you just did it. You guys let us fall flat. And then the officers that you sent out with their technology, that you guys are calling them the safe cities, that officer was so disrespectful to me when I got caught in the kettle and I didn't do anything because I was exhausted from being at OHSU for 24 hours. He asked me for everything under the sun. When I saw white people give a debit card, take a picture and keep going, that man wanted a social security number, date of birth, phone number, and when I forgot my phone number because he's standing there threatening me, he told me I was going to be arrested. That's your technology that you guys are wanting for a safe city? It's not safe for people like me. It's not safe for people like Star, who is standing up, or Standard, who's standing up for people like me. We need resolutions that's going to affect the city right now. We can't wait for 2 months to come and testify. We don't have time for that. I've never been violent. I've never been outspoken in the city council. I've never been disrespectful, but I was basically billy clubbed and bombed at the park just for standing up because a lot of the Black people in Portland are scared to death to come out and say anything. We would appreciate it if you lace your Nikes up and come out and say, we're not having that, we're not tolerating those things in Portland because that's what we need you to do. All this other stuff is irrelevant at this point.
Thank you. And just for the record, as I said earlier, this conversation is most certainly not over. I have questions, and I'm going to formulate those questions properly. If I've learned one thing in politics, it's not just asking the question, but knowing which questions to ask and how to ask those questions. So I am doing that. And I also did speak out very, very forcefully all last week on the issue of what was taking place in this city. And so I reject the notion that I was not present, that I was not heard. If you check the record, I was in the operations center as the police commissioner, watching and observing, and that is the right place. That is the right place. No, that excuse me. As the police commissioner, that is my responsibility to be in that center. No, excuse me. Excuse me. Listen. I have already called that out, and I support the U.S. Attorney's investigation of that incident, and that was not a Portland police officer. That was a Federal Protective Services officer who reports to Homeland Security, and as you will recall, they are the ones who issued the permit for Shrunk Plaza. And that was not a Portland Police Bureau action, and I do not support it, to be clear. Fair enough. Well, I answered your question, and you can take it or leave it. Sorry. Good morning. I don't make those calls. Sorry. Go ahead. If you'd like to testify, now's your chance. Please do not disrupt or I will have you removed.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Stan Schaefer. This techno-utopian vision sure sounds appealing, but maybe I keep hearing this word deployed. I don't know that I want militarized language attached to it, since we have problems with surveillance and militarization with profound impacts for people of color and other vulnerable groups. Activists have been targeted. Footage hasn't been shared with the police. We have police co-opting and asking for private citizens access to their cameras. We need to know that their rights aren't going to be violated. I want to make a modest proposal. Police should be fully automated. The RoboCops I envision would be more like R2-D2 and less like Terminator or killer cyborgs. They would be programmed to not throw flashbangs directly at people or gas elderly and the disabled. They wouldn't gas people who have already been detained. Think about cops now. Currently, there is no human element. Instead of just being dressed as RoboCops, these real RoboCops could be programmed to tell the truth and share it with other officers so guys like Marshman aren't caught off guard not knowing that police illegally detained and ID'd people, or that they got gassed after they were detained. RoboCops, I imagine, would be able to recognize a real Molotov cocktail and not overreact when they're being thrown. They could be programmed to actually inform the public about police activity instead of lie. The RoboCop version of the public information for the PBB could really be different. They could actually show the footage. They need to say, if there's criminal activity in Chapman Square, we want to know. We want to see that criminal activity, because those bricks, they're not missing from the building like the police said. The RoboCops I envision would actually be neutral. We have evidence from the white supremacists that were here this week. They are really proud that the police didn't face them, but faced Antifa, anarchists, peaceful protesters such as myself. They were really encouraged by that. I can provide this for you. But anyway, we don't even know if the retraining that police officers get when they get out of line, we don't keep data on that. We need to keep data on that. We need this data accessed by the people. People could be crowdsourcing this stuff, analyzing this data, and looking for real innovations. We could be using cameras on these new RoboCops that I envision, cameras that are on all the time and that use algorithms like the Seattle Police Department has experimented with, which block out faces until there's actually probable cause. These are the kinds of things that a smart city would start looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Watchdog X. Originally, when you applied for that $50 million grant transportation, City of Portland was in the forefront to get that money. I sat up here and I said, if you mess around with the Kevin J. Duckworth Memorial, I don't want to see you get that $50 million. As you know, Paul Allen put up $10 million of that $50 million. My suggestion to the City of Portland, do not mess around with the Kevin J. Duckworth Memorial. Come up with the maintenance money to maintain it. Karma just cost you $50 million, and I can assure you the people involved in this will cost you a lot more. Now, as far as autonomous vehicles, massive unemployment to this city that we've never seen at the scale we'll see. We will have an anti-technology autonomous vehicle revolution unless you project out and understand we will need a universal basic income for all the people that will be unemployed because of technology in the autonomous vehicles. You have to implement that. You have to deal with the labor force out there, or this city will be turned upside down. You cannot take away their incomes, have them lose their homes, have them lose their cars, have them lose everything else, and go, well, it's in the name of technology. We've got 5 big corporations. They're going to be making all the money, and guess what? The city is going to be run over like Uber and Lyft did and take away half the other taxi drivers' income and jobs. Again, it is a city's responsibility to talk to them straight to their face and say, what are we going to do about all the unemployed people in this city? Yes, your incomes are going to go through the ceiling. You're going to make a tremendous amount of money, but how are you going to take care of the locals in this city? I didn't hear one speaker from transportation have any concerns on that whatsoever. We will have the largest mass unemployment created by autonomous vehicles that we've ever seen in this city, and it is your responsibility to put things in place and let the technology companies understand it is your responsibility now to step up and explain what you're going to do, or you're not coming into the city. Take your autonomous vehicles, take them somewhere else. Do not create massive unemployment. That is your main concern right now. How are you going to prevent that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that is an important subject, and I'll just shout out Elon Musk. I don't know if you've been reading some of the things he's been publishing on this subject. He's sort of an interesting guy because he's one of the leading proponents of both automation and a universal wage, because he agrees with you that increasing automation in many ways will lead to unemployment in traditional arenas, and therefore has also advocated for this universal wage. I find his writings I think you'd find him interesting if you haven't already
If I may
read.
respond real fast.
Yes, certainly.
Elon Musk does look at things from a different position than a lot of the technology companies. He looks at benefiting the people first. He creates things that will do that. And we need to keep that in consideration when we're talking these autonomous vehicles. It must benefit the people first.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next three.
That was all who signed up.
Very good. Any further questions, colleagues, follow-ups? Please call the roll.
Fish.
Thank you, Mayor, for bringing this forward, and to the staff that presented. And I thought we had a good discussion. For me, when we look at these kinds of technologies and so-called disruptions, the question that I will come back to is, how does this technology serve people? And our world is becoming more complicated. We're getting these technological advances that no one ever contemplated. But are they really improving our quality of life? Or are they just adding a dimension of technological change to our world, benefiting a few and not the many? And so, having lived through the Uber experience, when I hear about disruptive technologies, I think we have to double down and be vigilant that we are protecting the interests of consumers, and that we are not allowing people to come in and do an end run around regulators. And we have that experience, and we need to learn from it. So I'm grateful for the assurances we've received that there will be a level playing field in terms of our stakeholders, and I'll be interested in how this comes forward. I will say one thing as a cautionary note. We have places in our community that don't have built-up infrastructure because we haven't gotten around to putting in lights, traffic signals, or safety devices. We are now talking about adding a layer over our technology to allow autonomous vehicles to operate, which will likely be in the central city, mostly. That's an additional level of investment in technology at the in terms of our physical infrastructure at a time when we really don't have an equitable distribution of infrastructure citywide. And so I'll be looking at that very closely in terms of where we spend our money. But I appreciate we're getting in front of this so that we can dictate our terms as this technology moves forward. Aye.
Saltzman.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for bringing this forward. It sometimes can be a challenge in our form of government to really focus a coordinated effort across bureaus and offices. And I'm confident that with the structure that was outlined to us today, we will be successful in overcoming that challenge and continue Portland's leadership role as an innovator. More importantly, our smart city efforts have the potential to improve our government operations, enhance Portlanders' access to city services, and provide greater transparency to the public. My office has been involved in this effort and will continue to be involved in this governance structure and will play an active role in its implementation. And I am in particular excited about the potential of our smart city programs to produce what they can produce with regard to safety and mobility in our transportation system. So I'd like to thank the bureaus involved and also particularly the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and in particular Kevin Martin, for convening this effort and providing the leadership necessary, as well as Portland Bureau of Transportation Director Leah Treat. So I'm pleased to vote aye.
Fritz.
Thank you, Mev and Commissioner Saltzman, for bringing this forward. I appreciate the leadership of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. The resolution names not only the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, but also the Bureau of Transportation, the Bureau of Technology Services, the Office for Community Technology, and of course I support all of those. It then says, and other city bureaus and commissioners' offices. So I'm certainly looking forward to having a representative from my office on this committee. Thank you, Mayor. I would also, I know that you have heard, and Director Treat also has heard, I would encourage you to particularly involve the Office of Neighbourhood Involvement, the Office of Equity and Human Rights. And then in terms of the leadership within our community that can provide expertise that a lot of time just does not exist within our city structure, the Commission on Disability and the New Portland Policy Commission, I think, can be very helpful in structuring this, and as I mentioned, the Public Involvement Advisory Council. So we have these wealth of volunteers who work as hard as city staff without getting paid, and so I'm sure that they would be happy to help with you, and I'm glad you're nodding and acknowledging that too. Happy to. Aye.
Wheeler?
So this turned out to be much better and more provocative than even I had hoped it would. This isn't just about leveraging technology, as somebody said during testimony. Technology is changing at a rapid clip, and it is changing the way we work, the way we interact as a community, as individuals. And I'm mindful of what was just said with regard to the implications of increased automation on our basic understandings about economic prosperity, about employment. And I'm also mindful of the fact that one of the co-founders of Twitter 2 weeks ago basically conceded that the internet is broken. It really didn't turn out the way they expected. So here we have these huge trends, and I agree with those who say autonomous and linked vehicles represent one of the most significant technological shifts that have, I think, the most profound impact on our economy. And there's two ways to approach this, because we know it's coming. It is definitely coming. We can either wait for it to happen, and I would argue that in the case of the ride-sharing programs, Uber and whatnot, the technology was developed, it was rolled out, it was broadly adapted, and then governments all over the world tried to catch up from a policy perspective. And the reality is the results have been very mixed at best with regard to protecting the interests of the broader community. On this issue of things like autonomous vehicles, I want to get ahead of the curve. And programs like this give us an opportunity as a community, rather than letting technology happen to us, it gives us an opportunity to shape the arena. It gives us an opportunity to shape the playing field before the technologies are completely rolled out and already broadly adopted. So I think this is not only a good idea, I think this is an essential idea. And as you know, I agree with everything Commissioner Fritz said about let's go broad, let's include people, let's have the conversation community-wide. That's great, but I want to also put the marker out there, and my bureau directors, all of our bureau directors understand this. We have to figure out how internally in a fairly fragmented city structure, we're going to work together and identify the priorities, communicate directly, identify the technologies, figure out how collectively we're engaging the community and actually achieving the goals, the lofty goals that are stated in this program. I'm going to agree with Mimi and Star on an important point. This can't just be talking points. This can't just be PR. This actually has to work. I would say this is one of the most critical things that we're doing with an eye to the future. So let's put some meat on the bones and do our level best to prove them wrong, and I'm sure they'd be appreciative if we could. I vote aye. The resolution is adopted. I'm going to try and catch us up a bit. Could we read the next two items together, please, 616 and 617?
616, amend the boundary of the Northwest 20th Avenue Local Improvement District and include traffic signal replacement in the scope of improvements authorized for the Northwest 23rd Avenue and Northwest Vaughn Street and U.S. Highway 30 intersection. And 617, authorize the Bureau of Transportation to acquire certain permanent and temporary rights necessary for construction of the Northwest 20th Avenue LID project through the exercise of the city's eminent domain authority.
Take it away, Andrew.
Thank you. Andrew Abbey is here, and I'll let you direct the presentation today on both items. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. I'm Andrew Abbey, Local Improvement District Administrator. I'm joined today by Marty Maloney, who's the right-of-way agent for PBOT, and Andy Sullivan, who's the traffic engineer for PBOT. I'm going to ask for Carla's assistance to switch over to the presentation, and I also just handed out an amendment for Agenda Item 616. Marty also handed out an amendment for 617, so maybe before we get started on the presentation, if we could go ahead and make those amendments. The amendment to 616 is for the purpose of withdrawing a remonstrance from XPO, which is withdrawn contingent upon council adoption of the amendment. The amendment to 617 is to add additional
5 additional right-of-way exhibits.
So I move the amendment to 616.
Second.
Fish moves, Fritz seconds the amendment to 616. That is now on the table.
I'll move the amendments to 617.
Commissioner Saltzman moves.
Second.
Commissioner Fritz seconds the amendment to item 617, so we now have amendments on the table for both items. And for those of you who are interested in testifying, we have 14 more items this morning. So I'm going to have to cut public testimony down to 2 minutes. So if you're thinking of testifying, think about how to shorten your remarks a little bit. Thank you.
All right, well, I will move very quickly through the presentation. I know you have a busy morning. So this is the boundary amendment that is in the underlying ordinance for 616. We're adding the property at 1825 Northwest 18th Avenue into the LID boundary for the purposes of building a curb ramp there. The property owner there is very cooperative, and in a moment I'll hand you out some testimony, but the property owner is actually interested in donating that right-of-way without compensation to aid the cause of building the new traffic signal, which I'll get to in a minute. So why are we looking at rebuilding the traffic signal at 23rd and Vaughn? Well, on August 24th, 2016, I got a letter from XPO. They were concerned that the planned improvements for 23rd and Vaughn were not as robust as they would like to deal with the congestion that will come with future development. And so I'll pass out a copy of that letter in a minute. Ironically, on the very same day, August 24th of last year, TriMet sent an email to PBOT identifying problematic intersections around the city where traffic congestion was delaying their routes. So this is a picture of Northwest 23rd Avenue, 2 blocks south of Thurman northbound. You can see the delays. You can see that car there hanging out into the intersection. So what we want to do is to flesh out this traffic on 23rd Avenue. Andy Sullivan is going to just briefly tell you a little bit more about what it is we're proposing for 23rd and Vaughn.
Sure. So at this slide, Andrew Sullivan, PBOT Traffic Design. So at this slide you're looking at here is a screenshot from our traffic modeling software. It's called SimTraffic. And basically what we use this as a tool to look at an intersection, input the existing conditions in terms of, lane assignments, signal timing, how much traffic volume, pedestrian volume, and so forth. So this slide here shows the existing condition if nothing were to change. I apologize if a little bit difficult to see. But what the model is showing is if we do nothing at the intersection of 23rd and Vaughn, the 20 acres or so of basically vacant land that's part of this development today, when that does fully develop, so these are future volumes that we're dealing with here, this is what we would expect to see in that area today. It's already backing up today, as we know, but it's obviously just going to make things much worse if we knew nothing. So we've highlighted backups on 23rd there, that pink box, and also backups on Thurman. This is all traffic trying to get to the US 30 on-ramp towards the Fremont Bridge, I-405 South. So if we go forward, here is a screenshot from a model with the proposed condition with some upgrades to the intersection of 23rd and Vaughn. So what we're talking is significantly altering how that intersection is going to operate. And those alterations, basically, we're going to have to rebuild the traffic signal, and so that's why we're talking about it.
No,
this is for here. I've highlighted the same areas with the pink box, and you can see with the future volumes and the proposed condition of the intersection. 23rd Avenue flushes out a whole lot better. There's no backups on Thurman Street. So we really anticipate that this is going to be a big improvement for traffic flow and livability within the Northwest neighborhood.
Thank you, Andy. And just the map that you see over to the right are the other nearby arterials in the area of Vaughn and Nikolai Street. And so we also are looking for options to more evenly distribute that traffic. This is my favorite slide in the whole presentation. I think this really shows how pedestrians are currently an afterthought at this intersection. So if you're walking from XPO and you want to go to the Dutch Brothers coffee shop on the north side of Vaughn Street, when you come up to 23rd and Vaughn, you have to cross over to the west side of the intersection. You have to cross north and then cross back over. So it's a very circuitous route for pedestrians. The arrows in green show that by collaborating with ODOT and replacing the signal, we can also restore the pedestrian connection at the other leg of the intersection. And these improvements also set up TriMet for potential improvements to bus service in the intersection. And this is my last slide, and I just wanted to show this. So there's almost 5,000 bus stops in the city of Portland. And the bus stop pair for line number 15, going through the congested area you just saw, is the 19th worst in terms of delay in the city of Portland. And that information was provided to me by TriMet. And, you know, this is really an equity issue because as TriMet is thinking about allocating their service hours, we would rather have them allocate it to new service, like in underserved areas like, say, Arnold Creek, Maplewood, East Portland. We'd rather see those hours go to new service as opposed to just simply throwing more buses and operators to maintain service on congested routes. So that is pretty much the extent of my presentation. Marty is just going to talk briefly about the property rights, and then I think we can take a roll call on the two amendments and then move on to property owner testimony.
Very good. And if I could just do a housekeeping item. For the people waiting for 6:35 and 6:36, we're going to do those next because I understand there's some people from the county on a very tight timeline. Sorry.
Mayor, Commissioners, my name is Marty Maloney with PWOT Right-of-Way. Ordinance 617 is to authorize eminent domain authority as well as to offer the ability to offer just compensation for the needed permanent and temporary rights associated with Northwest 20th Avenue LID. The property rights in question are needed for construction of bike, pedestrian, stormwater, and roadway facilities within the project area. I would also like to add that all affected property owners have been informed about the city's need for certain property rights and were invited to attend the reading of this agenda.
May I ask how many people attended?
We've made outreach to all the property owners over the last couple of years.
So no particular objections?
This has all been baked into the cake for a very long time.
Great.
So.
Cool. Thanks.
And then the only thing I would add before we turn it over to testimony, just really important to note that the funding for this new signal comes from the LID, meaning that it comes from private property owners. This does not come out of the general fund. These are not discretionary funds that we can use for other purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions before we turn it over to public testimony? How many people do we have signed up?
One.
Just one. Okay, great. 2 minutes, please.
Jean Harrison.
Thank you for coming.
Good morning. Let's see if I can get a little closer. There we go.
There you go.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Jean Harrison. I'm Chair of the Northwest District Association Transportation Committee. I'd like to thank Andrew and Andy Sullivan for the time they have dedicated to the Northwest 20th LID process. Both of them have been present at several of our committee meetings to explain both the process and the design for the Northwest 20th extension and the Northwest 23rd and Vaughn intersection. I'd also like to thank staff and XPO Logistics for quickly moving forward with the LID formation. I know it usually takes a lot more time, and I've really appreciated what they've done. Development already completed and under construction right now, along with future projects currently under review in the master plan area, will benefit greatly from these changes. We look forward to seeing Northwest 20th and the intersection improvements implemented next year. That's what I've been told. As background, before the master plan was approved, our committee worked with Conway and other neighborhood leaders to make sure that development in the master plan would create a dense and exciting neighborhood that fits into the larger neighborhood fabric. We also worked to make sure that the transportation system would be able to support the new development envisioned in the master plan. One of our committee members was instrumental in identifying the Northwest 20th extension as a way to alleviate traffic at this failing intersection. We have frequently stated that both the 20th extension and changes to 23rd and Vaughan intersection are necessary to improve access and flow and need to be done at the same time. The projects are linked and dependent on each other to succeed. This ordinance will help make sure that happens. Our committee feels that Andy has substantially improved on the previous design of Northwest 23rd and Vaughan intersection that was submitted during the master plan process by the consultants. His design substantially improves pedestrian movement and also reduces congestion on Northwest 23rd, which, as Andrew showed you, frequently stretches many blocks to the south during the afternoon rush hour. As an aside, I'd like to say that we know that the changes that are part of the LID will not be enough to adequately deal with travel demand now and in the future. The neighborhood is working with PBOT through the Northwest Parking Stakeholders Advisory Committee and with TriMet on a number of measures to reduce travel demand and improve transit service. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
I wanted to also thank you after your long distinguished career with the city. It's so heartwarming to see how much volunteer time you're putting into things that you used to get paid for. Thank you.
I love it.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Mayor Wheeler and
Morning.
council members. My name is Carrie Ayers-Palanek, and I'm the Service Planning Manager at TriMet. TriMet and the City of Portland have a long history of working together, and we value this collaboration. In this vein, I am here this morning to lend TriMet's support to the city's proposal for the Northwest 20th Local Improvement District, and specifically for the proposed changes to the Northwest 23rd and Vaughan intersection. We have 2 bus lines that travel through this intersection 7 days a week, one of which is a frequent service bus line, and we are looking at bringing another bus line into Northwest Portland from Northeast Portland. We have a few details to work through with PBOT and ODOT prior to that implementation. TriMet recently did a study of frequent service bus delays throughout the city of Portland, and as Andrew mentioned earlier, we found that this northbound Northwest 23rd to westbound Vaughan area to be the 19th worst bus stop pair for delay or variability of bus time. Our buses turn westbound at this intersection and therefore need to use the left lane. Our findings pointed to long queues waiting to get onto the freeway as the major reason our buses and passengers are delayed. Based on this analysis, we believe that having a free right turn will substantially reduce the queuing that is contributing to the delay that we are experiencing. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Could we please, unless there's other questions on the part of the council, can we take a vote on the amendment, please, to item 616?
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye.
I'm sorry.
The amendment is adopted. Commissioner Fish?
I have just a question. Are we going to now move to a vote?
It's not emergency,
No,
but is there any reason that
we're
we shouldn't?
moving it to second. We took a vote on the amendment, so I'm going to move it to second as amended.
Okay, so
if that's
Andrew,
okay
can I
with
just,
people?
I was just wondering why we wouldn't do this as an emergency. Is there a reason to
It's
delay?
not an
Just move
emergency.
to a second reading next week.
Okay.
Sorry? Yeah, nobody's
Second reading
moved
next
to
week.
an emergency.
So Andrew, can I just ask
Okay,
a
so
question?
this is a non-emergency first reading of an ordinance. It moves to second as amended. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Commissioner Fish had a
I was
question
just
for
going to
me.
ask him a question about this, Mayor, but if you want to move on.
Go ahead. It's still in process.
Okay. So Andrew, we heard some testimony about the queuing up that occurs on 23rd. And it's a no turn on red when you get to the road. So has PBOT weighed in on that question?
Absolutely. We've been working very closely with ODOT, and the design that we have is to channelize that right turn movement. And part of what the funding for the signal does is to put a traffic signal that would only stop the turning traffic when there's a pedestrian crossing that new connection that I pointed out in the presentation.
I should add that no right turn is more honored in the breach than the observance. I mean,
Yes.
we could put a traffic control person around the corner and make a lot of money. But it is odd, and that is, I think, one of the reasons that we get backed up. So that'll be resolved in the overall fix?
Yes, you brought that up at the formation hearing, and we've been diligently working on a solution for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further questions or comments? Can we please take a vote on the amendment to item 617?
Fish?
Aye.
Saltzman?
Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you for all your work on this. This is one of the projects that I was part of when I was on the Planning Commission, so I kind of feel like it's coming of age and going off to college now. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendment's adopted. This is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading.
Is this
And due to the,
Andrew, is this the June 28th one, or is that?
No, that's the other one.
Okay, thanks.
very good.
Sorry.
Due to time constraints, if we could please move to items 635 and 636, if you could read those items together, please.
635, direct the Bureau of Emergency Communications to work in consultation with partner agencies to review standards for all call answering based upon national best practices. And 636, support robust medical dispatch triage to improve outcomes and more effectively deploy emergency response resources.
Very good. And Commissioner Saltzman has to leave, so he asked if he could say something up front.
Thank you, Mayor. I have to go fulfill my Rose Festival responsibilities and be in the junior parade. But I did want to commend Mayor Wheeler and Commissioner Fritz for bringing forward both of these items. And certainly with respect to item 636, improving the 911 system for medical calls would allow the Fire Bureau to better meet the growing demand for increasing medical calls and would likely lead to decreased response times in the case of medical emergencies. Faster response times are absolutely key to increasing the Fire Bureau's ability to save lives and improve the outcomes in the case of medical emergencies. A robust and cutting-edge medical triage system would allow us to explore further innovations like telemedicine or nurse triage. Fire Chief Myers has been laser-focused on improving and innovating the medical triage system, and I know he and the entire team at the Fire Bureau will be an essential and collaborative partner in the implementation. So,
Dan, before
thank
you leave, can I just do a housekeeping matter? You'll be back at 2?
No, I won't.
So we have 6 matters, Mayor, on the agenda that have an emergency clause.
Can I have a question?
No, ma'am, just one, if we could, we have 6 emergency items. So when are you due back this afternoon?
I will not be back this afternoon.
All right, well, almost half of our agenda has an emergency clause, and, well, I just point that out.
Yeah, no, it's a problem. We'll have to sort it out.
And if I might just comment, Commissioner Saltzman, before you leave, I had the honor of sitting at a table with firefighters at the gathering in North Portland last night, so we had a really robust discussion about some of the things that I would hope to be involved in working with ongoing in terms of the Fire Bureau's response, particularly to mental health challenges in the community. So I'd be interested to see how quickly it bubbles up to your level.
Okay.
The items before the council are about resiliency and innovation of the public safety system, as you just heard. I've certainly made resiliency and innovation one of the cornerstones of the budget process to ensure that we can effectively deploy our public safety resources to respond to a community-wide crisis if and when it happens. One addresses the findings of the Ombudsman's report. 9/11 is a vital service, and it must be evaluated accurately if the city is going to be able to make good decisions. Best practices and good data should drive our decision-making, and I believe it's the city's responsibility to address issues completely transparently. The other item will direct the city to broadly engage the leadership of our public safety bureaus, first responders, and other jurisdictional partners to ensure that Portland is providing the best service possible to the community. I don't see improved medical triage causing the city to cut first responders. Improving the 9/11 system will allow both the Fire Bureau and 9/11 to respond to increasing medical calls and focus on decreasing response time in medical emergencies. Both items are about responding to crisis more quickly, resulting in better outcomes in medical emergencies and effective deployment of public safety resources to save lives. Faster response times are key to improving our public safety system. Since taking all the bureaus back, I've become involved in these issues, and I'm committed to working with my colleagues to addressing these issues fully, engaging our partners and employees, and supporting work to make our public safety system respond to the broader needs of our community. I'd like to allow Commissioner Fritz to give her own introduction and call up Margie Solinger, Joanne Fuller, and Lisa St. Helen to give the City Council an overview of the proposal. Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor, for partnering with me on this, these two resolutions. I appreciate that your office accepted several of our amendments to it. I think we all agree that the primary responsibility of the 911 Centre, the Bureau of Emergency Communications, maybe hereafter called BOEC, the primary responsibility is to get help in the community as quickly as possible. And so that's what we're all talking about today. We're all in agreement with that. We also all, I believe, agree that we would be horrified if a pocket dial on a cell phone impacted call takers' ability to respond to an actual help call. So that is something that needs to be addressed, particularly in a bureau that has been understaffed since the recession. And we certainly all agree. We're very appreciative of all the staff in the 911 Centre for the very stressful work that you do and the wonderful service you provide to our community. I was in charge of the Bureau of Emergency Communications in my first term from 9 to 12. As somebody who had previously then worked in hospitals for 27 years, I was fascinated to see the other side of the patients that we would receive on 1 Northwest at OHSU, for example. And I appreciate the Ombudsman calling attention to the issue of cell phone handling and data reporting, both of which are extremely important. I agree with Mayor Wheeler. The work that we've been doing since January, when I was assigned the Bureau, has come, as I said, at a very difficult time. We've had a Bureau Director transition, the ongoing staffing shortage, and the catastrophic failure of the Bureau's primary power supply unit in early April, something that's never happened before. So all of those issues have been primary urgent issues to take care of, and all very important. The budget, which we're poised to adopt tomorrow, includes 11 new dispatch positions, as well as support for a replacement power supply unit. And again, thank you, Mayor, for including that in your proposal, and colleagues for supporting it for the vote tomorrow. And the resolutions before us today are an opportunity to formalise the city's commitment to addressing shortages in our system. I'm also fascinated and I'm very much appreciative of the Ombudsman pointing out that there isn't any enabling legislation in City Code. And so should I be assigned the Bureau ongoing, I'm going to be very interested in leading that discussion. Just so everybody knows, though, the Bureau responds to all Multnomah County calls. So not only the county ably represented by Joanne Fuller today, but the cities of Fairview, Wood Village, Gresham and Troutdale, as well as the unincorporated area. So we have a user board. Several of the members are here today. Many of the delegates are police chiefs, fire chiefs from those jurisdictions, and that's the policy guidance that guides decisions in the Bureau of Emergency Communication. I also have to say right up at the beginning how appreciative I am of the way that the Bureau steps up in emergencies. And just to give you an example, for the Max attack, we had 51 calls in 10 minutes. And so I know from attending some of the memorials that people were frustrated that their call was not picked up right away. When something like this happens, now that everybody carries their cell phone, the Bureau is completely flooded with reports of the same incident. And so that's something that, as we look to the future, how do we make sure that we let people know that the concern is being taken care of at the same time as continuing to look at how quickly can we get help in a situation like that. So thank you to everybody here for working on these issues.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. And Margie, Madam Ombudsman, I don't know why I struggle to pronounce that. Why don't you go ahead and tee us up?
Swedish. Sure. Good
Thank
morning.
you. Swedish.
For the record, I'm Margie Solinger, Ombudsman for the City of Portland. I will do my best to get through this without coughing, but just fair warning. The first resolution before you is responsive to a pair of reports that my office issued about the city's 911 system. The first report came out last December, and the second report was publicly released today. Mayor Wheeler has been so quick to address the concerns raised in the second report that I barely was able to issue it in time for this hearing, but that's a really good problem to have. My goal is to give you a quick overview of the problems identified in the reports so that council and the public have some context for why this first resolution is being brought forward and what it's seeking to address. I first started looking into the 911 system last year when my office received a complaint alleging that the city took too long to respond to a fatal house fire. Although the allegations in the complaint were not substantiated, in the course of that inquiry, I discovered a problem with the screening device that the 911 center uses for accidental cell phone calls. The screening device, sometimes referred to as the Reno solution, was installed in 2004 because the 911 center was receiving an influx of accidental cell phone calls that were diverting operators from handling callers with real emergencies. The idea is pretty simple. Cell phone callers must prove that they are not a mistake. When you call 911 from a cell phone, a recording tells you to press a key or say 911. Only callers who take one of these steps will be transferred to an operator or placed on hold if one is not available. The Reno solution accomplishes what it's designed to do. In fiscal year 15-16, for example, it screened out around 144,000 accidental calls. Unfortunately, the Reno solution also resulted in unintended consequences that have compromised the 911 center's operations and, by extension, public safety. My first report focused on one of the unintended consequences. That report detailed how the Reno solution prevents the 911 center from calling people back who successfully make it past the screening system, but who hang up or get disconnected before speaking to an operator. 911 policy requires operators to call these people back in order to determine if an emergency exists. Operators are unable to do so because the Reno solution prevents the system from retaining the caller's phone number, and operators are not apprised that the call occurred in the first place. In fiscal year 15-16, the number of 911 calls affected by this flaw was around 20,000. The report I publicly released today focuses on the Reno solution's other unintended consequence. This latest report details how the Reno solution prevented the Bureau from tracking hold times for cell phone calls that actually made it through to an operator. As a result, the answer times that the Bureau reported publicly for more than a decade have overstated, sometimes drastically, how well our 911 system is actually performing. Instead of exceeding performance measures as reported, answer times are actually well below accepted standards. And I'll walk you through some of those details. The problem stems from measuring different intervals to calculate landline and cell phone call answer times. For landlines, the calculation is just what you would expect. The length of time it takes to answer a call is from the moment a call is received by the 911 center until an operator gets on the line. This is not the way it works with cell phone calls. And again, the Reno solution created the problem. Not only does it lose track of abandoned cell phone calls, but it also results in all successful cell phone calls being treated as if they have almost no hold times. Only the ring time interval, which is 1 to 2 seconds, has been counted toward the answer time for cell phone calls. When 75% of your calls are from cell phones, you can see how that skews the numbers. And here's an example of how this plays out. You've got two calls, both on hold for identical amounts of time. One is from a landline and one is from a cell phone. As you can see at the top, the landline call is accurately counted as being answered in 8 minutes and 17 seconds. Contrast that to the cell phone call below. Neither the 29 seconds getting through the Reno solution screening system nor the time spent on hold are counted.
Excuse me, just one second. Can I just ask a clarifying question? I know that some of the calls on 911 are from security systems, like alarms, that home security and such. Is that counted under the landlines or under the cell phone lines?
Neither. As I understand it, those are other emergency calls. A separate category. So a call that took nearly 9 minutes to reach an operator is counted as being answered in 1 second. Every cell phone call has been counted this way, and as a result, the Bureau of Emergency Communications has inaccurately reported its performance to a significant degree. This misreporting was on display during the most recent budget process. The Bureau's goal is to answer 90% of 911 calls within 20 seconds. Despite chronic staffing shortages, the Bureau reported surpassing this goal by answering more than 99% of all emergency calls within 20 seconds. The Bureau also reported averaging 1 second to answer 911 calls. After discovering the undercounting problem associated with the Reno solution, I asked Technology Services to run the numbers using the actual cell phone call hold times. Instead of answering 99.6% of all calls within 20 seconds, the 911 center is actually answering closer to 68% within 20 seconds, well below its target service level. The Bureau's underperformance is compounded by its selection of a modest target service level. The national industry standard is that 90% of all emergency calls should be answered within 10 seconds during the busy hour. Against the national standard for any hour, the 911 center's performance is even worse. Less than 30% of 911 calls are answered within 10 seconds. As you all know, the 911 center has faced staffing problems for years, and I think the underreporting has exacerbated the problem by removing the sense of urgency. The message the council and the public have been receiving is that the 911 center has managed to provide top performance despite chronic staffing shortages. Instead, it is now clear that it is performing well below accepted standards. People's lives are at stake, and our system for responding to individual emergencies and large-scale disasters is not working very well. And at least in part, it is likely because of the inability to resolve the staffing problems. I made several recommendations in the report about ensuring accurate reporting going forward, and I'm encouraged that the resolution before you today is a concrete step toward implementing those recommendations. I'd also like to note in closing that it was through the work of now Interim Director Lisa St. Helen that the 911 Center is able to more accurately track hold time data. Director St. Helen was also critical in discovering the problem addressed in the first report.
Thanks, Nick.
She has been receptive to the recommendations I make in the report, and she is unquestionably dedicated to getting the Bureau back on track. Thank you for your time. I almost made it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Well, why don't we?
the whole panel?
Yeah, why don't we let her recover a bit? Let's go ahead and just hear the whole
Archie,
panel.
can we get you an aspirin or a lozenge or something?
All of the above.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
I'm not seeking to curry
for being
favor with the
here.
ombudsman. I just want to make sure that.
No, but it's never a
How
bad
about
idea.
a medical?
Is it? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm next?
You're next.
Thank you. First, thank you for the opportunity to be able to come and speak regarding both of these resolutions.
Can you put
and
your
also
name in the
about-
record?
I'm sorry, for the record, my name is Lisa St. Helen, and I am the Interim Director for the Bureau of Emergency Communications. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come and speak about the resolutions and about the Ombudsman's report. I do look at this as an opportunity to solidify our Bureau's commitment to doing exactly as the mayor said, and that is ensuring that we are providing the best service possible to the community and to our partner service agencies. Although I have been the interim director for 2 months, that obviously is not a very long time, I am still able to sit here confident before you and affirm that our Bureau is absolutely willing and on board to ensure that we are operating with full transparency and probably more importantly with statistical clarity about what's happening within our Bureau. As the interim director and simply as a City of Portland employee, I look at myself as a public servant. I know it's a word that gets tossed around a lot, but I take that sense of obligation very seriously. The Ombudsman's report offers many recommendations, of which I am very grateful for. I believe that those recommendations, when enacted, will ensure that we are moving towards our goal of providing the best service and getting ourselves back on track. And ultimately, my hope is that in a few months, BOEC will be invited back to this table. And whoever is representing BOEC at that time, my hope is that the narrative will be different. And the narrative will be that we didn't come today and talk about cliches or talk about wanting to do better or getting back on track. The narrative will be that we did get back on track and that we recognized the errors of the past. We had a sincere desire to fix them and that we have in fact moved forward. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And your leadership of the Bureau and addressing this, and even before you were the interim director, has been exemplary, and I really appreciate working with you.
Thank you.
The question I asked the Ombudsman in terms of the alarm system calls.
I think we were going to finish out the testimony and then come back.
Oh.
We were going to hear from all three, and that was what the mayor requested.
Well, do you agree with the
I apologize, I didn't hear your question, I'm sorry.
about the alarm system calls, that they're not, the Ombudsman said those aren't counted anywhere?
The alarm system calls actually come in on the 911 line, on the 911 trunk. They are prioritized below the 911 calls themselves. So anytime a 911 call comes in, it will jump ahead of any alarm call that is waiting.
But that is included in the time, the average time, the response to those?
My belief is the answer is yes. I would have to clarify with the technological person that provided that report to Margie.
Thank you. And just one other question of clarity. Does the caller on the cell phone have to actually say 911, or would any loud noise be enough to trigger it to becoming a live call?
Yeah, it actually doesn't even have to be a loud noise. We still get pocket dials that come through. It can be any noise. It can be a button push. It can be any sound. It can be 911. The sensitivity is set at a point where any type of audible noise will push it through the system.
So in a system, in an incident like the Max attack, the amount of noise that was going on there would certainly have got through to the 911 operator.
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's great
Good
to
morning.
see you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Joanne Fuller, I'm your Health Department Director at Multnomah County, and I'm here today to talk about Resolution 636. So you all know that by law, counties are required to develop an emergency medical plan and to contract for ambulance services. We do this in deep collaboration with all of the cities within our jurisdiction and with your emergency responders and the emergency responders from other cities and with BOAC. And this year in developing, well, actually in 2016, as we developed the plan that our board adopted in December of 2016, we also, for the first time, deeply engaged communities, both using an equity lens, communities of color, and also users of the ambulance service system to try to get their perspective as well as the perspective of responders and the agencies that we work with. Our board, as I said, adopted our new plan in December of this last year. That plan calls for one ambulance provider across the county, which is what we have today. And when that change went into effect many years ago, that was really to end what people termed the ambulance wars, which was different ambulances racing to the same scene to try to pick up a victim. And we believe deeply that one plan with one service that works with all of the different other first responders will create the best service possible for our community. In addition to that, the plan also calls for us to implement a more modern, robust system for discriminating between the urgency and acuity of different calls. This is a technology that's used in cities across the country, and it will really allow us to dispatch resources in a much more refined way, which means that our most urgent, our resources which are needed for most urgent situations will be dispatched to those, and we'll be able to, as Commissioner Salzman was saying, create additional refinements where we're responding to emergencies in a much more granular and differential way. We believe that this is critical because we're seeing an unending increase in the demand for response in the system, and as we continue to deploy technology and make it easier and easier for people to call 911, we expect that that demand is going to increase, and so we need to adopt this technology that will allow us to make a more discriminated choice about how we deploy the resources. And I'll answer any questions that I can. Thank you.
So I have
Commissioner
some
Fish,
questions.
please.
I think we've lost the ombudsman. And I wanted to just tell her, and I'm sorry she's not here, that one of the reasons that I strongly supported Measure 26189 is we put her office into the charter and ensured that she would have independence and be able to precisely perform this function. And I did not expect so shortly after the election would we have such a clear indication of the benefits of an independent ombudsman embedded in our charter. So, Ms. St. Helen, I know you're the interim director, and so there may or may not be questions that you can answer, but I read your response to to this report, and you say, quote, "Bureau decision-making has been transparent." But isn't precisely the thrust of this report that it has not been transparent? In other words, how can Bureau decision-making be transparent if the central claim of the Ombudsman is that both the public and the council have been provided with inaccurate information? How does that meet? What's the transparency standard that you're referring to?
I believe that my response or that statement was in reference to articles that are brought forward or implementation of new technology and things that go into BOEC, new programs and such. And those items have always been brought to our user board and vetted through our city commissioner. At no point have I stated that the fact that the information provided in the past decade of statistics to City Council and to anywhere has been incorrect. It has. It has absolutely been incorrect. But as far as that statement that I made, it was really pointed more towards the vetting of any new programs or technology that goes into our building.
The Ombudsman says at page 5, the Bureau leadership has known for at least 18 months that the information was incorrect.
Yes, sir.
As part of your initial review of this matter, have you been able to make any preliminary determinations as to why that information was not corrected in a more timely manner?
The information, the fact that we had a significant issue with our statistics was identified in the mid-portion of November. I met with our Bureau of Technology Services the following day, and I have met with them until the fix that we're currently utilizing was implemented in November of 2016, and I met with them on a regular basis multiple times every month to keep track of what was happening to rectify the situation.
No, and I applaud that. And that in page 2 of your June 2nd response, you allude to the fix that was put into place immediately, and you're to be applauded for that. But the question that I have is that the Ombudsman says in her report that the Bureau was aware of the fact that incomplete information had been provided to the council and the public for almost 2 years. Have you been able to determine why that was the case?
The answer is no.
But I would, if I could help out here.
I'd like to first ask the interim director.
I believe that there's two parts to this problem that we recognized. And the first part was the fact that we recognized that there was a technological problem that had provided us incorrect statistics for a decade. And then we had to get that fixed. There was another issue that had to deal with how do we address this issue.
Right.
As the operations manager at the time, I was responsible for ensuring that a fix was found, for working with our BTS services and ensuring that a fix was found. I was not responsible for addressing this in a public forum or in a city council forum or.
No, I appreciate that, and I did not mean to imply that you were, but you're the most senior official here to
absolutely,
help us understand
and if what you're
it.
asking is whether or not I know why those decisions were made or why they were
Yes.
reported that way, the answer is no, I do not know.
Okay. Just in plain English so that I can understand it, what was the fix that you implemented in November?
There is no plain English for this.
Or as simple as possible, just so we get the gist.
BTS is now able, they have implemented some type of a script, a computer script that allows them to pull data from one entity, which is called a CDR. I don't know what that, it's a data receptacle. And they are able to take that information, which contains the cell phone callers, and they take the information that comes in from our landline callers, and they are able to manually, and I believe that they have this automated now as well, but combine those numbers, which is supposed to give us reliable data now.
And from the moment you became aware of the problem to when the fix was implemented, how long did that take you?
Almost 1 full year.
Took you a year.
Took us a year, yes. There was an attempt at a fix in February of 2016, and the data that came out of that fix was clearly not accurate either, and so they continued to work on another fix.
How much of this problem would you attribute to the short staffing at the Bureau?
The problem with the incorrect statistics, none of it. This is an issue that came with the implementation of the XMU system. It does not have anything to do with the short staffing. The short staffing is absolutely, and the chronic short staffing is an issue, but it is not, in my view, directly related to this problem.
One last question. The Ombudsman said that as a result of her findings, she concluded that public safety had been compromised. Now, anytime there's a delay in addressing a call, there's the risk of some compromise to public safety. It could be a longer period of time until an ambulance or fire truck reaches an emergency. It could be a longer period of time till a police officer is dispatched to an incident. But that's an abstraction unless we quantify it. Do we have some way of determining whether, in fact, there was an actual compromise to public safety on a human scale?
I do not.
And Ombudsman, is there some way for us to determine whether, as a result of any kind of delay, something bad happened that was otherwise preventable?
That's not something I tried to determine, but as you said, there's a delay in answering, there's a delay in dispatching that results in a delay in responding and providing the care that's needed. And in an industry where it's a matter of seconds instead of minutes that matter, it was meant as the abstraction that you described.
Right. So I appreciate that this report has a series of what seem to me to be very bold and clear recommendations, and I appreciate that the resolutions before us essentially embrace them, and we're going to move forward. I'll have a question for the mayor in a moment about timeline, because I think it's very important we set public expectation about when these things are going to happen and when we'll have code language come back and the like. But Ms. Salinger, a question I have for you is that you've identified something very, very serious, and that is incomplete or inaccurate information coming to decision makers. Now, we are free to make bad decisions. Our system allows us to make bad decisions, but we rely on having good data upon which to make good or bad decisions. As you step back and look at this particular case that you've investigated, any lessons learned about steps that we can take in the future to ensure the public and our process that we have good data? Were there any flaws in our system on our side of the table in terms of getting good information when we needed it?
I don't think you pay me enough to answer that question.
Do we pay her or does the Ombudsman pay her? I mean, does the auditor pay her? I don't want to run afoul of the charter here.
I think there are systems.
Well, I guess I would say, what are lessons learned for you in terms of this question about making sure the public and the council has reliable information?
I didn't try to do a full post-mortem on this one. It was more important to kind of just get the information out there. I do think you have a number of processes already in place, which the recommendations suggest making use of, like the Technology Oversight Committee. The City Budget Office provides a monitoring role for these key performance measures, so I think they have a role to play in terms of making sure that the information that council is getting is accurate and fully accounts for the situation.
Did you get full cooperation in the course of your investigation from the Bureau?
Absolutely.
So you got what you needed?
I did. Director St. Helen in particular has always been very forthcoming.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
May I?
Commissioner Fritz.
I just want to thank, again, Lisa St. Helen, who was one of the key leaders in bringing this attention to light 18 months ago. So I appreciate that. I also remind you, Commissioner Fish, that at no time that I can remember over the last 9 budgets has the council made decisions based on, oh, the call time is fine, we don't need to worry. What we've been looking at is the staffing matrix and the extreme shortage, and also the mandatory overtime in order to cover minimum staffing. And we have, when possible, approved more staff for BOAC. You'll remember that Commissioner Novick was very insistent on that, and we, to the extent we could, approved his requests. So there's a shared acknowledgement of the problem, and we appreciate the Ombudsman bringing this forward. There's a shared embracing of we need to address both the data and the staffing issue, and that the council, under Mayor Wheeler's leadership, has allocated more resources to BOAC, and I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that comment, but I don't know how the council would have reacted one way or another based on getting accurate information about call times. And at the very least, it would have allowed other third parties to come to us, raise a flag, and say this either falls below or above an industry standard. So I don't know how we would have acted differently. But in my 9 years on the council, this is one of the most sharp reviews by an independent body on the question of the quality of the information that the public and the council receives. So I'll just leave it at that. And so that, what we would have done with it, I think the council, my sense is that we have not put adequate resources into this bureau, and we'll correct that in part in this budget. I think they're going to need more resources. I am actually shocked that there isn't the code structure around this. That's, I think, another great benefit of your report is that we have to create the legal code structure for this, and we have a chance to get it right now. To me, this is not, I'm not looking at this in terms of looking for scapegoats right away. I'm looking for how we can make sure that our role as an oversight body, that we get the information we need to do our job. And when I read in a report that we're getting inaccurate information, I have no idea how we would have acted one way or another, but at the very least, someone might have said that we were falling below a standard that we should be adhering to.
May I speak just to that point? You had asked me earlier if I understood why the council was given inaccurate data, specifically, I believe, in the last budget cycle. It is perplexing to me, and I have to assume, I can only assume, that it had to have been gross oversight, in that had we reported the actual data that the Ombudsman has taken the time to present today, that would have solidified what we have been talking about for years,
Yep.
stating that we need more people to help answer the calls in a timely manner, which frankly doesn't just serve the public, it serves our bureau and the city as well, because our folks are not getting burnt out taking call to call to call. So why it wasn't addressed, I don't know, but I am equally concerned.
Well,
So
I just want to say, Mayor,
sorry.
I'm glad you said that, because the mayor and I had a similar conversation recently with our friends at the Regional Arts and Culture Council, which for the first time is going to be the beneficiary of a performance audit. It's in the queue, it's funded, and an independent team of auditors are going to come in and look at how they spend their money. And that understandably has caused some anxiety. And what Ted and I have said to our friends at RAC is that facts are friendly. If the audit determines that all your systems are working just fine, then congratulations. If the audit says that there are things where you need to tighten the bolts or do things differently, then better now than later. And I think the point you just made is, I must say, I compliment you for adding that to the record. Had we had accurate information, it would have underscored in red underliner the fact that the staffing issues needed more of our attention, and I appreciate you calling that out.
Commissioner, if I could say so, and again, I'm glad the frame of this discussion is not piling on Lisa. And I want to second what the Ombudsman said. I believe Lisa has been completely forthright in my conversations with her and has been aggressively pushing for and supporting the reforms that are encapsulated in these resolutions. So I want to thank you for that. And I know you're feeling the heat at the moment.
A little bit.
And that's okay. That's leadership. We all inherit things and we own them, and that's what leadership is all about. So thank you for that. I think it is more serious than the way it has just been characterized. I do not believe it is accurate to say that this was a staffing problem. I believe this was a failure of leadership, and I believe it was a failure of accountability, and I believe the city council was misled when the plea was made for additional staffing. That plea was actually, I believe, severely undercut by repeated statements that the data was favorable in terms of the response time to 911, 911 calls. And in fact, what the Ombudsman has uncovered is that sometimes a call that took 9 minutes to get through was counted as a 1-second call. And it defies the common sense test. When somebody says, how long did it take for your call to go through? What they mean is from the time that they dial to the time somebody on the other end of the phone picks up and says, hello, how can I help you? And to have that interpreted as 1 second, I don't know what planet you have to be from to assume that that is the right answer to the question about how long did it take to answer the call. It defies common sense. And so, Lisa, I want to thank you for your frankness and your willingness to push hard and work on addressing these issues. And I want to thank the Ombudsman. She had to explain this to me. I mean, I think the report is excellent because it doesn't delve into the details. The details are mind-numbing in terms of the different switching mechanisms and communication channels and interrelationships of different data centers. It is very complicated. And I don't want to in any way understate the importance of the work ahead. To the answer to Commissioner Fish's question to me, what is the time frame here and how do we set public expectations? The time frame is this: however long it takes to do it right is how long it's going to take. I don't think we have a clear sense right at this moment, Commissioner Fish, about exactly what it is going to take to be able to correct this serious problem, but these resolutions set the table for us to be able to do that in an open and accountable way, working with the right people to help us address this problem. I mean, there are few services the city provides where life and death is literally on the line, and this is certainly one of them. So it's got to be a top priority, and we'll take, and I'm glad I'm hearing strong support from all members of the City Council to pursue this. And Lisa, thank you again for stepping into the breach and working with us on this. I'm very appreciative of the partnership with other jurisdictions. Joanne, it's always a pleasure to see you in any context. And the auditor's trying not to be recognized today. She's hiding behind a column, so I won't see her. But thank you. That's it. That's my tirade. That was the whole thing.
May I just ask one thing? There are some technology solutions coming. I don't want to leave the hearing with the public concerned that it's going to take months to, that we're not trying to address it. So would you just go into the new phone system that's going to come into play later in the year?
Sure. So every 5 years, the State of Oregon Office of Emergency Management is responsible for upgrading the phone systems within the entire state of Oregon for all the PSAPs, or all the 911 centers. Most, if not all, I think there might be 2 or 3 left, have transitioned to the upgraded phone system. BOEC being the largest in the state, generally we go last. We wait until all the bugs have been worked out. And we are slated for that implementation in November of this year. We will start doing training on that in October of this year. With that upgrade, we'll bring a fix. We will be able to eliminate this pseudo manual fix that we have in place, and all data that we get, regardless of where a call comes from, whether it be landline, VoIP, or cell phone, the data will be collected in one portal. So we'll be able to take all of that information from one place, and we will be assured that we are reporting clear data. Additionally, it also provides us with better ways to divide out calls, and we're able to look at clusters of calls ahead of time. So say, for example, on the, I don't want to use the max stabbings, if we were to have a large-scale event and it resulted in multiple phone calls, say, for example, a car accident on a freeway, and we get a spike of 27 calls, we will have the ability, I am told that we will have the ability to look at that and realize 24 of those are coming from that sector. We'll be able to pick the one that's coming from over here because we've already got the information and we're heading that way. We're still going to get to those, but we're going to get to the one over here that might be a different emergency. And so when this new phone system comes in, we'll have that capability as well.
Thank you. And what
sorry.
what is happening about the staffing issue that we're all concerned about?
The staffing issue, last year, in order to address the staffing issue, our training department has implemented 3 academies as opposed to 2 academies. This year, we are doing the same, and we have slated the same for next year. We will be, I have our training manager here. I believe we have something close to 30 people in the training pipelines right now at different phases. Looking at the numbers that we have right now, my best guess, and it is a guess, but it's an educated guess, is probably by mid of next year, we're going to see significant improvement. Probably within 2 years, I believe that we could be well over the 100 staffing mark, which is where we've not been in longer than I can imagine.
And how long does it take a trainee from the first day to when they can operate by themselves?
From about, on average, anywhere from about 14 to 18 months.
Thank you.
I want to come back to the Ombudsman for a second. I'm just going to quickly tick through your recommendations. Ensure performance data collection and reporting is accurate. So that's an ongoing process, correct? Mm-hmm. And it may very well include a follow-up investigation as to why information was not corrected. It seems to me, Mayor, that there's an additional inquiry that has to be conducted here. And then stress testing the systems to make sure that this and other bureaus are giving accurate information. Is that fair?
Yes, yes.
The Gator system, help me understand this. You've recommended that either there be a government accountability transparency results session to address 9/11 or a legislative oversight hearing, or both, I suppose. But a legislative oversight hearing would be us holding a hearing for the purpose of doing what?
My sense is that the 2 reports that I did are just scratching the surface of the issues that are going on at the 911 center. I don't profess to have uncovered all of the problems, and so rather than stopping short here with just what I've been able to figure out, it struck me that it would make sense to do a full airing conversation, pointed questions of everyone involved to just make sure that the system is working properly, that the problems are identified, and that whatever steps that need to be taken going forward are addressed.
That could be a council work session, right?
Sure.
In fact, Mayor, my own experience is the council work sessions, because you can schedule who is speaking and structure it in a more formal way is actually sometimes more helpful in terms of doing oversight. Even though we can't make a decision, I think as an information gathering tool, it can be more helpful. And it's also out of sequence. You do it on a Tuesday and not jammed into a busy schedule on a Wednesday or Thursday. Tasking the city's technology oversight committee, that's straightforward. Reassessing staffing needs, that's an ongoing question. And then codifying BOAC as a standalone bureau. That seems to me to be something the city attorney is tasked with doing, and that comes back. So, Mayor, I would just want to add one thing to your excellent resolution, which is that in the early fall, we schedule a council work session to have you update us on the progress towards the various recommendations, and with an opportunity for the council to go a little deeper into this.
Sounds good. I'll work with staffs to do that. Commissioner Fritz, and then let's see, how many people do we have signed up for public testimony?
I believe it's possibly about 8. I think a lot of people have left.
Okay.
So before getting that, I just wanted to note and a reminder that it does serve the whole of Multnomah County. So in terms of the city attorney coming up with enacting legislation, I think it would need to be more of a potentially commissioner-led collaborative partnership rather than just our shop bringing it. So thank you, Director Fuller, for your willingness to do that. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Very good. And colleagues, while we are waiting for public testimony, I want you to think about something. I would like us to adjourn about 1, because I'd like to give us a break before the lengthy afternoon session. We do not have enough of a quorum to be able to entertain emergency items, resolutions, or ordinances. We could, however, still hear the presentations on those. Commissioner Saltzman has already agreed through his staff to review the video of those options, and then we could just vote on them quickly tomorrow afternoon. So we could do the hearing and the testimony on those items today, take the vote tomorrow. So think about that. I have been pinged that we have one individual waiting very eagerly for pulled consent agenda items 6 to 4 on the Albertina Kerr and the different spokes to acquire bicycles and operate adaptive bicycle rentals. We also have a issue with regard to item number, hang on, the last time certain. We are going to lose Andrew Abbey soon. Andrew, how long can you stay?
I would need to leave at 2 o'clock.
Great, so I think we can do it in that order.
Mayor,
Collins,
I
if
support
works with
that.
you.
Can I just make
Okay.
another suggestion? If we're going to set over the emergency items for vote until tomorrow at 2, we're losing our quorum tomorrow at 3.
That is correct.
And so could your office let us know this afternoon at 2 which of the items scheduled for tomorrow afternoon are to be set over?
So I was going to keep this secret until I was far away from the building. Our staff is already working with your staffs to see if we can start early tomorrow.
That's
I
fine.
knew you wouldn't like
But for
that.
example, we're not going to get to the 3:30 time certain.
That's correct.
So, I mean, if we
Yeah.
can just know what's going to be
Yeah.
pushed off
Very
altogether.
good. Happy to do that. All right, why don't you guys, to the degree you want to stick around or take a seat, we'll take some public testimony. Again, 2 minutes each, please.
Okay. Is there a Red Hamilton? Alan Frischhovler? Alan?
Frischweiler.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, that's a W. Becky Smithson? Grace Hip or Phoenix Hip? Rob Wheaton? That's Rob. How about Brighton West?
I think some may have made their commentary on the way out of the door. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Go ahead. Oh, okay, great. Well, my name is Brighton West. Do you need to address 3741? No? Okay, perfect. So I'm here as one of those dropped callers. I'm here because in January of last year and December of last year, I made 911 calls, once for an impaired driver that nearly hit me and once for a fight breaking out in the middle of the street. And the calls were, one was dropped and the other was not, this stayed on hold to the point where it was no longer an emergency. I did notify the mayor's office at the time, who then notified Steve's office, who then notified the bureau, which I got some, sorry, sometimes we get busy. And then the second time, I notified Steve's office directly and never heard back. So I guess the point I want to make, and I mean, I hate to rely on the Oregonian, especially when there's negative information, but I get here from the Oregonian this morning, let's see here. Until this week, Bureau leaders ignored the Ombudsman's advice that the prompting of Commissioner Fish, Turley, and St. Helens dismissed the Ombudsman December findings in a March budget session before the council. I hate to, and then actually it goes on, and Commissioner Fish says if we would have dropped 18,000 people, we would have certainly heard about it. I was telling City Council multiple times, multiple councilors about this problem. And this seems to have happened months ago, not years ago. So I guess I do want to say that the City Council needs to hold some responsibility for not listening to the Ombudsman the way she should have been listened to.
So I would like to comment that I did talk with the reporter for 12 minutes yesterday, and nothing that I said appeared in the article. Also that previously when it was under my leadership, we do investigate every concern that's brought to us and get back to the community members. So I'm sorry that didn't happen previously, but if I'm assigned the Bureau, then it certainly will be. And we acknowledge there's been many problems and that we are committed to fixing them. And I support all of the directions in this resolution, which is why I put my name on it. So thank you.
Rob?
Okay. Rob Wheaton, Oregon AFSCME. Of course, I represent the employees at the Bureau of Emergency Communications, the 911 dispatchers. I want to say that at this moment, I have never been more appreciative of the Ombudsman as I am right now. My members at BOEC have been complaining for years that this data seems to be inaccurate. We've been told that they've cut off the top 1% is statistically irrelevant. We've been given a variety of stories that some of these longer hold times aren't really 911 calls. They're alarm companies calling in, which, by the way, is still an emergency. I mean, that could be a crime in progress. We started notifying you guys through social media of long hold times that we've seen up to 25 minutes. And this is something that we found absolutely unacceptable. So we're happy to hear that something is being done today. I appreciate the remarks that you made about let's move some things forward. I also agree with the Ombudsman that this is just a scratch of the surface of the issues that exist at that center. It seems that, we just went through a long bargaining process that resulted in arbitration where we ultimately lost, but we were trying to secure wages because we can't control how this place is managed. And what we could really do to increase staffing here is change the way this place is managed, change the culture of management there, and start, really making a difference within this system. So, I would encourage the City Council to restart the national search for a bureau director. And I'm just happy to see that you're passing this resolution today.
Thank you, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank your colleagues. And I appreciate the conversations that we've had on this, and I definitely look forward to engaging you going forward. Thank you for your good work.
And I'd like to agree with that, and also to stress that I think all of us really appreciate the work that's being done to the best of anybody's ability in the Bureau, given the staffing situation. So thank you. Please thank you, members. For that.
Yeah, I'll pass that on for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Alan Frischwell, I'm president of the Portland Firefighters Association. Commissioner Friss, thank you for the help on my last name. I appreciate that. And just the other day I was working, and I work out of the PSU fire station, and a perfect call that came in that you want to address. And Rescue 24 went from North Portland over to Terwilliger Terrace, and the call was to help move a patient from one bed to another. And it really does show that we go on calls that we don't need to go on. So I want to be really, really upfront that we are supportive in looking at that. One of the things that was surprising is to hear about this resolution on the news and not be pulled into part of the resolution and looking at something that would be such a drastic change. And so that's really the basis of what I wanted to talk about, is that as we look at trying to change a system that has been in place, when I was hired in 2001, I think we went on 50,000 calls or 55,000 calls, and now we're going on 90,000 calls. And so it has increased a lot. My fear is that if we haven't engaged the union and really the Fire Bureau yet on this issue, my fear is that we don't continue to be engaged and not put as a key partner. Our fire chief isn't even here right now. This is a resolution that he should be a part of. When you look at it, one of the things in 635, it has BOAC, BTS, OMF, CBO, but there's nothing for the Fire Bureau in there. On 636, it talks about labor relations working with BOAC management, but it doesn't put the firefighters in there as well. And so if we are going to get involved, which I think we should, then what we need to do is get involved with everybody. And so where we have talked about GMT and ambulance service area, we really haven't had a lot of cohesive support from council to be able to push a lot of those issues. And so in summary, if we are going to do it, let's do it all together and go all in, but let's all be partners to do it.
Yeah, Alan, thank you for that admonishment, and I'll take responsibility for that. We did engage at the management level. We should have engaged you. It was wrong not to, and I apologize to you personally. We'd absolutely love to have your engagement in this process. So no disrespect intended. That was an oversight on my part. So thank you for the offer.
And we don't need to amend the resolution. That's
no, we do
the
not.
legislative intent. And I also want to thank you back when the county was passing their resolution that you brought that to my concern. Your commissioner at the time was involved in negotiations that I wasn't part of. So yes, I'm very glad that you'll be involved moving forward, and with AFSCME as well, and the other unions like the Portland Police Association.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe that's all who signed up.
That is all. Very good. Commissioner Fish, did you have an additional question or comment?
Nope, just look forward to voting on both.
Me too. So with that, please call the roll on 635.
Fish?
Again, let me begin by thanking the Ombudsman, who works in the auditor's office and is now embedded in the city charter, for taking on this issue and releasing this report. I believe that an independent auditor is crucial to good government, and I think this report once again underscores the need to have an ombudsman that's protected in the charter, and I was pleased to support that effort. Mayor, I appreciate the diligence and frankly lightning speed which you brought this forward. This is one of those times where, while I agree with what you said to Alan in terms of engaging our partners, I'm glad you acted promptly and expeditiously. And there's quite a lot of reference to our friends at Portland Fire and Rescue in resolution number 36, and I know that we won't move forward without fully engaging our friends at the Fire Bureau, so I'm glad that Alan framed that. I made a note as the testimony was going forward about the challenges the Bureau faces: staff shortages, transition in leadership, not being in the charter, communication with council, history, regulatory issues. That's a lot. And so let's take one moment to, again, thank the dedicated employees of the Bureau for the service they give to our city. And as someone who uses the system from time to time, when I see something that's problematic, I've always gotten a prompt response and dealt with a courteous and well-trained and professional person. So I want to acknowledge that, the folks who are providing public service. This issue, though, about the information flow to this council as a decision maker is fundamental to how our government operates. And I don't know that in my 9 years I've read a report quite as scathing as this. The question is not now just dwelling on the past, it's making sure that this doesn't happen again. And so I think it is now our job to dig a little deeper, Mayor, to understand how this happened, and then to support you as you implement a series of reforms to provide this Bureau with even more strength going forward. And I do think it has been chronically understaffed, and I welcome, and not in the fall bump or whatever appropriate time, Mayor, an ongoing conversation about what is the right size in terms of staffing of this Bureau. We ask an awful lot of these folks. They do very stressful work, and we should be proud of the work they do. Thank you for bringing this forward. Excellent discussion. Aye.
Fritz?
Thank you. Thanks to the auditor and the ombudsman for bringing this forward. It's really evidence that as we move to more performance-based decision-making, sometimes even the City Budget Office, which I know Commissioner Fish shares my pride in having helped create, they also missed this issue when we were evaluating whether performance measures were met. And so, as I say, I think good-hearted people and very earnestly trying to provide the best services, that's something that we all share. And we need to figure out, and as was also noticed, as more and more people would call for things that they might not previously have called for, we are going to continue to have more and more calls. And so there's going to need to be some community education about some things being higher priority than others. I will, of course, beat my usual drum that when we have a 311 system, it will be much easier for community members to get a quick response on issues that maybe a 911 dispatcher doesn't need to take care of, and so I'm looking forward to that. I appreciate all of the recommendations and join in the Mayor in firm resolve to address, in particular the issue of having a government accountability, transparency and results session. I think that's a good approach. We do need to make sure that all of our partner agencies are involved, not only Portland Fire and Rescue and the Police Association, but Gresham Fire and Police, Multnomah County, the Sheriff's Parole and Probation folks, the Port of Portland, the Airport Fire and Police, Fairview, the Corbett Fire and Police, and Sylvia Island Fire and Police. These are some of the partners that we work with, and it's going to be very important to make sure that everybody's at the table and figuring out what goes into the code, what goes into policies, and how we're going to work with the county as the emergency medical system request for proposals goes out, so that we're sure that what's in that request speaks to the needs of the staff providing the service as well as the community members. And so I know I have the commitment of the staff in the Bureau of Emergency Communications, and again, thank you to Director Lisa St. Helen. In just 2 months, you've already brought some remarkable transformations within the Bureau, and your willingness to address this issue leading back 2 years ago is exemplary, and I very much appreciate everybody's participation. I look forward to working on it as we move forward. Aye.
Wheeler?
I'll let my previous comments stand. Aye. Resolution is adopted. Please call 636.
Fish.
Aye.
Fritz.
The only people I forgot to thank were Claire Adamsick and Tim Quayle in my office. Tim was my liaison for 4 years in my first term, and Claire's been a remarkably quick study in the second. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the resolution is adopted. Please call item 624.
Authorize grant agreements not to exceed $28,000 with Albertina Kerr Centers and Different Spokes to acquire bicycles and operate an adaptive bicycle rental pilot project.
There was public, did you want to come up and just give 1 minute?
Yeah, I can now.
Oh, you were the one who asked for public testimony on this item? Yeah, great. Please have a seat. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your patience.
With my disability, and I need to request an accommodation, especially with the time. Part of my disability is my ability to articulate and present something, and you can either honor that or not.
I honor you.
But I
Please
am
have a seat.
requesting it.
Very good. Request accepted. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your patience.
A housekeeping matter. You did ask Commissioner Salzman whether he was returning, and you said no, because in that chaos, I was told by his office on Monday that he would be here because he was the overseer of PBOT and this issue.
Ma'am, let me just say, I will apologize to you on behalf of the council. Mayor and I have already had a sort of a conversation about having a more reliable system for ensuring that we have a quorum and that we have people here to listen to the public testimony. And frankly, I think we've gotten a little casual, and I think that's something for the council and the execs to resolve. And I apologize on behalf of the council. You're entitled to be heard by.
That has great meaning to me, great meaning, because I love my city and I respect all of you. I have a difference with this, and that's why I called this item. But disagreement does not mean that we do not have civil discourse.
It's how I've stayed married for 25 years, so thank you.
Could you please just tell us your name for the record?
My name is Perla Stillwater.
Thank you.
Thanks, Perla.
And with a heavy heart, I'm going to make this presentation, and I'll make it as brief as I can. As I stated earlier, sometimes my disability impedes my ability to speak. If I feel like I cannot present it, I'll just have to excuse myself because it's been a very long day. I think it's very important. Oh, one other housekeeping detail. Did I understand you correctly, Mayor, that you have all the bureaus still?
Correct.
Okay.
For a very brief period of
Yeah,
time.
try to be a good citizen, and I keep abreast of changes, but I just needed to make sure because Salzman's office confused me. Okay. I think it's very important for the city to consider and include all populations when rolling out programs funded by our city. This issue with this bike adaptive program to these two businesses has both a general and a very direct question and challenge to the business at hand and the program overall, because it's a very limited address to accommodate and modify for providing accessibility to adaptive cyclers. The group in general is historically marginalized both by the set of factors, their economic issues, their vulnerabilities, and so the whole time that I attended these meetings and workshops and open house for this program, my focus was on cost and accessibility. And each time I was looking at equitable issues, the solution. I heard Commissioner Fritz earlier state when you were doing the SMART issues program about how does this help or change the lives and it is equitable for people who are disabled. I heard Commissioner Fish earlier say, how does someone who lives here benefit from this program? Those are focal points. So the question, which I just got a couple of answers to on Monday, but they're still not agreeable to me, is this is a 30-day another emergency thing. They wanted a 30-day, waive the 30 days, and it's also a 3-month pilot program. So I had to search my conscience and say, whoa, if one person can get access to one adaptable bike under this program, don't hold it up. But then I balanced those different issues because this is the only thing we get for the year. And I thought, I think that the selection process was flawed. I was there from the beginning. Like you, Mayor, I asked the critical questions. How was it going to be selected? How was it going to be implemented? What was going to happen to the bikes? And who's doling out the money and who ends up with the product? Just on Monday, if I understand correctly, these two bike shops were not in a competitive process. They were selected from the beginning, and even at the open house, I asked, will there be some type of bidding process, because I was looking at the cost ratio. And if I read the information that PBOT sent me, saying that the bikes will stay with these bike shops at the end, I thought, oh, those dollar bills could maybe be better spent getting a greater cross-section of Portland by putting bikes throughout the city and allowing people where you get a greater cross-section to use adaptable bikes. The 3-month pilot program has always been a little bit of a dismay, and how I will, the best I can state it right now is when you rolled out the Bike Town program, there wasn't one consideration. There is not one bike in the city of Portland. PSU students and PCC students I mentor, there are Bike Town bike racks out in both of their facilities, and not one of those students or their support staff or caregivers have had access to anything. And we rolled this out. And so I'm asking, when you roll out an adaptive bike cycle system this time, make it equitable.
Thank you. Good testimony, appreciate it. Is there anybody from, if you want to come up and maybe remark on some of those comments? They're good comments. And thank you for your patience today. Hello.
Hello.
You know the drill. Name for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Steve Hoyt Macbeth. I'm with the Portland Bureau of Transportation.
And I'm Nicole Schroen, and I'm with the Office of Equity and Human Rights.
Thank you.
I know the council is pressed for time, but I think it might be helpful if I provided a little background on the program at the council's pleasure.
Certainly.
So I want to speak to one of the last things that Perla Stillwater said, which is absolutely true, which is that this project is a product of us not incorporating access to people with disabilities at the onset of the launch of Bike Town. And I failed to say that I'm the Bike Town project manager. So that is absolutely true. The genesis for this program grew out of requests for accommodation that we heard last May and June when we were getting ready to launch the Bike Town program, both in terms of specific requests for accommodation and also some community advocacy around that. And so the development of the program was kind of based on us learning from what we could from other community groups. So at the national level, there's no one right now that is doing an adaptive bike program that's kind of connected with bike share as we're proposing doing it. So we're trying something new in Portland. It's very rare to have bicycle accommodation for people with disabilities within bike share programs. So we're really doing something new here. And so that was part of the reason for the pilot, was not to try to over-design something when we didn't have a lot of good best practices or places within the city, or excuse me, within the country to look, or within the country. So in general, the purpose of this program is to increase bicycling based on our climate goals, to increase access to people with disabilities to bicycles along with seniors, and to look long-term at how we incorporate adaptive bicycles, which are bicycles designed for people with disabilities, to be able to use as part of our bike share program and a potential further integration. We've spoke to a lot of people. I would certainly say that there are a lot more folks that we need to speak to, but we had, in our mind, a fairly robust process. Last summer, we began about a year ago going to a number of people and organizations, the Adaptive Bike Clinic, the Hand Cycle Summer Series, Wheel Connect, Elders in Action. We had an online survey with over 200 responses. Our Adaptive Bike Work Group, which occurred this spring, this spring, was composed of 75% of our work group was composed of people with disabilities. It was a decision-making process that was really driven by people that would be future customers or would represent future customers to our program. And then we had our open house, which was very well attended, and a number of our work group members were very commented on how that it was one of the better attended open houses from the Portlanders with Disabilities community. So there's some things that we learned when we asked people what they wanted. And I think that what I would say is that this concept has been developed with the customer in mind, and not, as opposed to starting with bike share as the kind of developmental starting point. It was really about what does our customer want and what they need. And what they told us was very distinct from how we operate bike share in North America. People said they wanted a staff service. People who had a mobility device wanted to have storage of that, to have storage available for that service, for their device, and they wanted to bike. A number of them, a vast majority, said they wanted to bike on multi-use trails. They weren't interested in biking in traffic. So that's very different than how bike share operates. And so we came up with this design of working with businesses that provide the type of service that our customers were telling us that they wanted. And that brought us to this model of a pilot project with bike rental shops and bike shops.
So can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
Because we're about to run out the clock, and I want to steer this a little bit. Number one, if we choose not to approve this ordinance today or tomorrow, does that effectively mean there'd be no summer pilot?
No, it would just mean, the reason
June.
for the emergency ordinance was so that we could place, so that the bike shops could place the order and that we could get something up by late June, early July.
But it's now June, so we're talking about a summer pilot. So if this is not the acceptable mechanism, essentially we'll do a pilot some other time than this summer. Is that fair?
Yes, and
Okay.
yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, do you intend, subsequent to this pilot, to publish the results of the pilot and engage the community in those results?
Thank you. Yes. In fact, the intent of this being on emergency consent was that I thought it would be better use of the council's time to come back with the results and talk about where we go from there to
So
yes.
earlier, the mayor said that because we don't have a requisite number of commissioners to vote on any item like this, that what we're going to do is have a hearing, and then this will be brought back tomorrow, Thursday at 2 o'clock for a vote. Would it be possible for you to follow up with the person who testified, just to take a few more minutes to understand her concerns? And if there's any follow-up information you think we need, send us an email between now and next Thursday.
Sure, yes. I would just say that there was a selection process. I just wanted to clarify.
No, I understand,
but
we're not going to resolve that here. And I think, in fairness, since we're not going to decide the question today, we could have an opportunity to have a discussion. And then if there's any remaining issue, you could let us know that between now and Thursday at 2 o'clock. Nicole, does that make sense?
Yes.
Except that I would like, since Nicole has sat through this whole morning, I'd like to hear your comments briefly now. Thank you.
I mean, for me, I think the disconnect is, it is a pilot program. So it's not the same thing as when we're launching a huge, big program and we're doing a huge RFP and we put it out to anybody who wants to bid. Basically, Steve contacted organizations who he knew did adaptive bike processes, and these were the only two that said, yeah, we have an interest in even being at the table, let alone agreeing to do it. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge to, and I think Perla has a very good point that we did not engage the university students in the first go-around because we really did focus on the disability community that were known bike users. And so we're hoping that the next time around, we're going to really make sure that we're engaging at the university level as well. And of course, if it's successful, we will definitely be able to put out a bigger, broader, and say, hey, who wants to be at the table? So I don't know if that gives you guys a little better context of why I think we're here.
I'll just say that I, speaking for myself, when you say it's a limited pilot for the purpose of learning more through doing, I think my inclination is to give you more of flexibility to do that, and then to come back and fine tune it before we go with the all in. So I appreciate your comments.
The challenge, though, as Mrs. Stillwell said, is that with such a limited program, it's not really like the Bike Town, where you can take it one place, drop it off another.
Right.
And then if we are going to get some more information before tomorrow, I'm looking at the insurance requirements, and can't remember what we required for Bike Town, but I want to make sure that people who use the bikes are properly covered in the event that there's a crash.
So just to be clear, could you send us a follow-up email between now and tomorrow at 2 o'clock, just with whatever follow-up information you'd like us to have? And this would be otherwise scheduled for vote tomorrow, too. Thank you very much.
Very good. So this item is continued until tomorrow afternoon.
Did anybody else want to testify?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, sir. I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't realize.
No one else had signed up, but.
Very good. Come on up.
For the record, my name is Sarah Hobbs, and as my disability progressed, one of the most heartbreaking things I had to give up was my ability to ride a bike. The disabled people are often on very limited incomes because of inability to hold jobs, dependent on, say, Social Security disability. I look at those orange bike share bikes and fight hard not to cry, because it reminds me constantly of what I have lost because of my disability. I had no idea there was even a discussion about doing a disability accessible bike share program, because I would have been like, yay, count me in on the discussion, because literally I ended up there's a lot of things I have lost because of my disability, and my ability to ride a bike was at the top of the list. So I feel her concerns were all extremely valid. It broadened the discussion. Remember, we're out there in places you might not even think, age-wise, in ways you would not think, with disabilities you could not imagine. Broaden the scope of who you include in these discussions. And let's make it happen, because I want to ride a bike again. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So the item is continued till tomorrow afternoon. And then here's the remainder of our few minutes together. Why don't we get to the last time certain? Andrew has been waiting here patiently, and then if you wouldn't mind, colleagues, we'll blast through the second readings. Okay. Call it a morning.
618, create a local improvement district to construct street, sidewalk, and stormwater improvements in the North Burlington Avenue and Edison Street Local Improvement District.
Good morning. Or afternoon, sorry, that train sale, never mind, you know what I meant. That train sale.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Andrew Abbey, Local Improvement District Administrator, thank you very much for allowing this item to come up before you adjourn. Carla is switching over to the presentation. I want to be respectful of the council's time, but we did have some important changes to this LID, so I just want to make sure that they're covered. So thanks to Carla, we now are switching over to the presentation. So there's a few folks that are here today that were not here on May 3rd when council approved the resolution of intent. You'll recall this picture of Edison Street, very poor condition, no stormwater management, etc. This is the current parking along North Edison Street. This is the area of the LID that was originally petitioned. You will recall that we had testimony on May 3rd about dealing with the stormwater problems on North John Avenue, and I think we lost some of the folks that were going to testify on this. There was interest at the council level in exploring a street vacation, and I did some research after council approved the resolution and confirmed that we could not do a street vacation because of a water main in the North John Avenue right-of-way. So wanting to deal with the stormwater problem, I reached out to property owners east of North John Avenue and had very significant interest to expand this LID to go from the west right-of-way line of John Avenue to 100 feet west of Richmond Avenue. And so I did a notification process to all of those property owners that council, if council approved the amendment today, could potentially expand this LID. And we got a pretty positive response, and as noted on this slide here, we got no objections or remonstrances. We got no remonstrances against the LID from anybody, and we only got 2.3% objection to expanding this LID. So the recommendation that I am making to council is to adopt the June 6th amendment, which would increase the scope of this project and deal with the stormwater issues.
Have we put this on the table yet?
I think we would need a motion
Mayor,
to do so.
I move the proposed amendment.
Commissioner Fish moves the June 6th amendment. Commissioner Fritz seconds the motion on the amendment. Why don't we go ahead and take a vote on the amendment?
Fish?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The amendment is now adopted. Continue,
Thank you,
sir.
Mayor. So I drew a circle here around the area that is added to the LID. And just to kind of wrap this up, this is sort of the sense of urgency that I found after council approved the resolution. So I talked to the first property owner to the east of North John Avenue. He owns this apartment complex here. What he said in written testimony to me is he said in June 2012, rainwater and debris flooding from the street overwhelmed the 36-inch storm drain in the middle of our parking lot. The rising water overwhelmed the 6-inch drain at the bottom of the laundry room stairs, continued into the laundry room, overwhelmed the laundry room drain, and then flooded the lower dwelling unit. Over 500 square feet of laminate flooring installed 3 months earlier were destroyed. Replacement cost was roughly $2,000. That incident has made me very cautious about making improvement to the lower apartments in the future. So what you have here is you have a property owner who's being subjected to damage to his properties due to the failure to manage his stormwater runoff. And in addition to that, I learned that there's 2 mobility impaired residents here. He mentioned that he's owned this apartment building since 1997. He has very long-term tenants, as long as 32, 20, and 10 years, who have a variety of disabilities that make walking difficulty. We have 2 tenants in this apartment complex that cannot go to the grocery store 3 blocks away. They have to have somebody come pick them up and drive them in a vehicle to go shop for groceries. So it just seemed, that's the end of the presentation. So it just seemed that there was a very compelling case to deal with stormwater management and provide pedestrian access to the folks living on the street. So we have a couple folks here to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Then one other quick thing. I was hoping that we could postpone the second reading to June 28th to allow for additional testimony on the written record. The idea is not to have another hearing or have in-person testimony on the 28th, but just simply to hold the record open until June 28th to provide some additional time for testimony.
Very good.
Thank you.
Legal counsel, given that this is it is an ordinance, but it is also a hearing, does it require a motion to leave the record open until June 28th, or can we just do that by agreement?
Technically, you can just do it by agreement.
Very good, thank you. Any further
We have some testimony.
testimony on this item?
I don't know if they're still here, all here. Helen Ost, Barbara Adamski, or Frank McMurray. And then we have one more after that.
Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you. I second what Commissioner Fish just said. Who would like to start?
Please start, go ahead.
Okay. I'm Helen Ost. I'm the volunteer co-manager at the John's Community Garden. And I walk down there a lot to the garden because I live on Willamette. When I come across Edison, I'm on the sidewalk almost all the way until I get to Richmond. And then I should walk on, because there's a sidewalk there too, but it's
hard to get on the sidewalk and off and stuff. And so I, along with a lot of other people, have a tendency to walk in the middle of the street. Not a very good idea. But that's the way a lot of people do it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing a road improvement there with the sidewalks. I can walk on the sidewalk and parking areas. The two things that are important to me, we have sidewalks along both sides of the street, and we have 81 families that garden there. And so they're getting out of their cars with their children and with supplies and that kind of thing, and walking across the street, so it would really be helpful. In fact, there is a sidewalk area along some of the older houses there. I've never figured out why we have sidewalks in some areas and not in others. And because of the drainage being so bad, the water actually runs down and puts mud on the sidewalk, so it's actually slippery and actually a better idea to walk on the street than on the sidewalk. The other thing is the improvements to the drainage. Right now, I don't think you showed the pictures today, but the North Johns Street has a big gully down it because of the drainage issues. And that means that we can't have a truck bring our compost and our wood chips down to the lower garden. We have to actually do it with wheelbarrows. I'm to the point now where I can't really use the large wheelbarrow. I'm getting older. So, I'm sorry. That's it.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Babs Adamski, and I live on North Edison Street. And I live in a section that was part of the initial improvement district. But I garden with Helen, and I advocate for pedestrian improvements whenever possible. I'm also a stormwater steward in my paid employment, and I look at what happens on my street, and I see residue from the street going into vegetation. So I'm very happy for this improvement, and I want to support it. I also wanted to encourage Council and PBOT to look holistically at improvement districts in our neighborhood, which is Cathedral Park portion of St. John's, because there's a number of developments that are going in. There will be another improvement district if it's, I think it may have already come before you, I'm not certain, at Richmond and Crawford. And I, as someone who sees resources or opportunities when resources are being spent to share capital cost, I'm hoping that some of this work can be done together. One other thing that I'm particularly interested in is a development that's going in at North Edison and Burlington, across the street from where I live. Our home, which I know that you've heard about during the initial discussion on the improvement district, is putting in a co-housing, or there will be, Community Vision is putting in a co-housing community that will be called Our Home, and my husband and I intend to live there. But some of our neighbors are identified as those with disabilities. And I really want to advocate for additional capital improvements when possible to improve pedestrian access. So that's me. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Frank McMurray, and I'm a 20-year resident along Edison Street, and I'm fully in support of the proposed LID and its extension. I call to your attention, however, the fact that I think that the mud that these eloquent ladies have spoken about is largely generated from Charleston Avenue. And if you look at your presentation item number 6, which Andrew presented to you, you'll see Charleston is to the far right. And it is, with the exception of one narrow strip, essentially unpaved. And it is the Colorado River every winter for about 6 months, generating the very mud and gravel that the system just cannot handle. So If you really want to fix the problem up there, it needs to include Charleston in some form or fashion. And whether that's including it, extending yet further the LID, I would be in favor of that. That would be the full fix. But the full problem will not be fixed until something's done on Charleston.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Good.
I just want to comment to the neighbourhood folks that in response to a request at the last hearing, I did ask Parks about the improvements in Cathedral Park for the transition plan for Americans with Disabilities. There's several on each year. The bulk of them are going to be done a little later, like in 2021, something like that. But we certainly have identified them all and are planning to take care of them. So thank you.
Thank you.
And the last person is Sydney Callison.
Thank you for the chance to speak with you. I'm Sidney Callison. I live on Edison Street, and there's been a tremendous amount of building and growth in the St. John's area. Traffic is increasing. The cars are attempting to not use the main street by going in the neighborhood streets, and that's really a big concern, or I notice it a lot. So most of the people that live in our little section have a garage, and they use the garage for storage. Consequently, most people park in the driveway. And my hope is that we can allow enough room in the driveways to get 2 cars, or some facility for not taking away the available parking. The Charleston situation that Frank mentioned is absolutely true, that it washes the rocks off of Charleston down the street, and that's where the water comes from. I like living where I live. I love it, and I like the city, and that's all I have to say.
We appreciate that. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your patience. Is there any further public testimony?
That's all who signed up.
Colleagues, any other questions on this item? If not, this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance and hearing. It will move to June 28th as amended. The written record will remain open for further information.
Nice job, Andrew.
All right, so let's try and do this. We're going to move some stuff along here in the next 5 minutes. First of all, item 629, which was pulled from the consent agenda due to a lack of quorum, is being moved to tomorrow afternoon. Item 630, is there anybody here to testify on item 630? Please read the item.
630, authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Metro to provide funding in the amount of $50,000 for the Regional Construction Workforce Market Study.
Colleagues, any more comments or questions on this item? Hearing none. This is a non-emergency first reading of an ordinance. It moves to second reading. Item 632, due to lack of quorum as an emergency item, is moved to tomorrow afternoon. Same with item 633. Is there, okay, 634 was not pulled, so we will move to item 637. That is a second reading. If you can read item 637.
Was 632 also pulled, Carla?
I have 629.
Oh, you did have 6?
Okay, yeah, 629.
Yeah, 629 is moved to tomorrow afternoon
sorry,
as a result of a lack of quorum.
Was 632 pulled, Carla?
Yes.
Okay, 632 has to be moved then to tomorrow afternoon. Could you read item 637, please?
Amend fee schedules for land use services and code enforcement.
Any other questions or comments on this item, colleagues? Please call the roll.
Does anybody want to testify on that? I don't think anybody's here.
Sorry,
It's a
is there any
second. I'm
public
sorry. It's a
testimony?
second reading.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's a second reading. Please call the roll.
Fish.
Aye.
Fritz.
Thanks to Deborah Sievert-Morris, who sat there all morning. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, thank you for your patience, sorry. Item 638, I have made a decision to refer that back to my office. So item 638 will be pulled back to the mayor's office for further conversation. I don't believe Captain Graham is here for 639, so that item will be moved to...
We have someone here who did want to testify.
We don't have time.
Okay.
Who is here?
Dan Handelman.
Dan, I am sorry. Do you want to...
Mayor, he was here at
Yeah, you know what,
9:30.
let's do this.
let's
Read
let
the
him
item,
go.
let's take his testimony. We'll do this in a really unconventional way. You've been very patient. So read the item, let's take Dan's testimony. We'll have the presentation and the vote tomorrow. Come on up, Dan.
639, amend an agreement with the Portland Business Alliance to provide policing services for the Clean and Safe program.
Thanks, Dan.
I appreciate that very much, Mayor Wheeler. Has been a long morning and afternoon. I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch, and this is our concerns about this item, which you may know is about taking money from the Portland Business Alliance to hire 4 police officers to patrol downtown on their behalf. I had to check our records from 5 years ago because the full contract wasn't included with the agenda item. This used to be just 3 officers, and now it's going up to 4 officers. And some of you weren't here 5 years ago when this came up last time, and we testified then, and we continue to testify now, that the way tax money is supposed to work is that everybody pays in and everybody gets the same services. And it seems to me it's an equity issue, which we've been focusing on a lot more since 2012, last time this passed, that downtown gets more police officers because they can afford it. And there are lots of neighborhoods, I think, that want more police. You know, that's not for us to decide as Portland Cop Watch, but they're not getting extra police protection because they don't have the same money that the Business Alliance does. So we're hoping that you'll reconsider just renewing this contract without putting more thought into it. We've often raised the question, if Portland Cop Watch had enough money, could we hire our own police officer, maybe have them walk around in a clown outfit? But we don't have the money for that. So, we're very, again, I think you really should look at this as an equity issue, and whether or not this is the best way for us to, when you do public-private partnerships, it shouldn't be that the private partners get to have the most protection and decide who's going to get prosecuted. I'm pretty sure that if you look at who these 4 officers are ticketing and going after more often, it's probably houseless people in the downtown core, which is not equitable. So hopefully you'll reconsider signing this new contract.
All right, thank you, Dan. I appreciate your testimony and that item. With that testimony, and I'm looking at legal counsel to make sure I'm doing this right. We're moving it, but we're also taking on the record. So I guess what we'll say is we're keeping the record open on this particular item, since Dan has testified, and I don't want that testimony lost inadvertently. Am I doing that correctly?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
It's a nice day when I get that. Okay, 640 being moved to tomorrow afternoon. Christine's going to hate me. She will never come back. 641.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Commissioner Saltzman's office asked that 640 be rescheduled to the 14th, June 14th.
Thank you. 640 is being rescheduled to June 14th. And I'm sorry, I don't have my calendar. Is that
That's next Wednesday.
That is next Wednesday morning or afternoon session, or do we know?
Morning session.
Morning session. Item 640 is being moved to June 14th, morning session. 641 and 642 will be moved to tomorrow afternoon. Please read 643.
643, approve rental rehabilitation conditional grant product guidelines.
Please
Mayor,
call
we
the
have
roll.
a
Commissioner
staff
Fish.
person present. Andrea, could you come forward for a second? I was not here for the second half of the first reading, and Andrea Mathiasen is here from the Housing Bureau. Andrea, I had flagged some concerns about the way this is crafted and the way it would be implemented. Has the Housing Bureau proposed any changes to the original draft?
We haven't proposed any changes, Commissioner Fish, Andrea Mathiasen, Portland Housing Bureau, but we did prepare a brief FAQ that we hope provided additional clarification on how the program would be implemented. I think your offices received that early last week. I'm happy to resend it if you need that and answer any questions.
I'm sure you did send it, and unfortunately, I haven't seen it. So, Mayor, if you could set this over, it's for vote only, set this tomorrow afternoon, I'd appreciate it.
Happy to do that. Without objection, item 643 will be set over till tomorrow afternoon, and if you two could have a chit chat, that'd be helpful.
Thank you.
Great. And with that, folks, we are adjourned till 2 p.m., where we take up this fun and excitement and intrigue all over again. Thank you.
Nicely done.